One in 2038 AD, Mars became the absolute last line of defense for survivors. The people of Earth and the Moon had hope, but 3 years later, it all cracked. A massive counteroffensive against the alien invaders was finally scheduled to begin. The battlefield was the Martian defense line, right where the Earth Federation's stronghold stood. David prepared for this day with extreme care, gathering every piece of gear he needed. As commander of the Federation's elite Bloodwolf Squad, he suddenly received a red alert. A critical message flashed on his screen. A squad mate named Magnus, known as Fatty, called in with some highly urgent news. The enemy had already ambushed their position. Right now, the surviving members of the squad were desperately holding the line. But the horrifying alien monsters they faced were just too many to count. David didn't hesitate, ordering an immediate charge to push the beasts back. His soldiers opened fire instantly. By this era, military technology had evolved completely. Gunpowder was ancient history by now, replaced entirely by high-powered laser weaponry. David yelled to keep shooting, yet the lasers barely scratched the alien hide. Even tactical nuclear strikes did absolutely nothing to these things anymore, David realized. It was incredibly frustrating, back when the invasion first started years ago. Standard human rifles could easily take them down, but after 3 brutal years, these creatures had adapted to survive even direct nuclear blasts. Because of this, over half of the Martian defense line had already fallen. The monsters even used brutal new counter-tactics to slaughter humans, especially their commanders, and honestly, the sheer cruelty is horrifying. 3 highly advanced mutant species had just emerged from the alien ranks. To wipe out humanity, they had mutated into distinct, specialized combat classes. David had no choice. He quickly triggered a high-level orange alert. These newly evolved beasts possessed frightening speed and overwhelming physical strength. The squad desperately needed backup. Against these modern nightmares, humanity stood no chance. All of human military superiority had completely vanished. Still, David knew that their most critical objective in this hell was basic survival. He ordered his squad to stay calm. He would personally handle the 3 new mutants. Leaving Fatty in charge of the main defense line, David prepared to charge. He sprinted directly at the closest mutant, which actually seemed surprised to see him. David Hayden was a legendary elite fighter with 22 years of clean service. He had never once tasted defeat, not today. Yet even a veteran like him was shocked by how fast these monsters moved. As a claw lunged to grab him, David fired his weapon directly at it. That definitely pissed the beast off. It was shocked anyone dared to fight it. The mutant immediately retaliated, launching a deadly, burning energy strike straight from its gaping mouth. A concentrated laser blast shot out, but David managed to dive out of the way. Thanks to his years of intense training, he predicted the creature's path and moved instantly. Sliding to one knee, David aimed carefully and returned heavy fire. He believed that no matter how much they mutated, they couldn't touch him. But just then, a creeping shadow approached him silently from behind. Before he could even turn around, a massive, clawed leg slammed down right in front of him. The swarm was actively breaching their defense post, leaving David completely isolated. He watched as they pushed toward the Earth Federation point, but David had doubts. David realized he had to hold them off and buy some time. Meanwhile, Fatty pinged him over the radio, asking where on Earth the lunar sister squad was. Time was running out, their men were dying, and they desperately needed backup. Holding off these monsters much longer was practically impossible, but David still wondered why Luna's squad was so late. The general counterattack should have started already. Yet not a single warship from the lunar squadron was anywhere in sight. Had they been intercepted? Worried, David tried calling the Central Command Center of the Lunar Federation's offensive after several quiet, desperate moments. Filled with static and failed attempts, the signal finally went through. But instead of a professional dispatcher, a wave of horrific noises broke out. The chaos on the other side shocked him. Those weren't human screams. It was the alien monsters communicating, and one of them had answered his call. Hearing those guttural clicks, absolute horror washed over him. The base was gone. Can you even imagine that dread? No rescue teams were ever coming. They were entirely on their own. David stared at the approaching horde. His mind racing, a bitter, sarcastic thought crossed his mind. He'd seriously have to find a wife in his next life. Suddenly, Fatty cut in. Fatty had already locked himself into his specialized combat suit, claiming the first spot. He offered a final, heavy apology for dragging David down all these years. Then, with a sad smile, Fatty activated the deadly sequence of his suit. A blinding, monstrous explosion ripped through the air, instantly vaporizing half the horde. But too many still remained. Now it was up to David to finish the job. This was going to be his final mission, a direct, one-way ticket. Suicide was his only option. He pulled out his locket for one last look, staring at the warm faces of his mother, father, and sweet little sister. In a way, this meant he could finally find peace and leave Mars. The terrifying alien beasts had fully enclosed him anyway. Escaping was impossible. Only a few of their comrades actually carried this final, self-sacrificing weapon. Few possessed the pure courage to trade their lives for their brothers. But David didn't hesitate. He was ready to pay the ultimate price. He keyed his detonator, holding his family in his mind, and charged forward. The activation triggered a blinding, cataclysmic blast. It was the single most devastating strike leveled against the alien invaders. David felt his flesh tear apart, a brief, agonizing instant of pure pain. The red soil of Mars violently trembled beneath the shockwave of his sacrifice. As leader, his suit carried the biggest payload, but his story wasn't over. And just like that, our hero's journey takes a massive, unexpected turn. His spirit drifted free from his shattered form, floating into the vast unknown. Suddenly, his spectral essence shifted hue, wrapping tightly into a protective cocoon. Plunged downward, and through the cosmic haze, David felt himself falling deep. Then the universe went dead silent. Next thing he knew, he was lying down. His eyes fluttered open in a totally unfamiliar room. He felt entirely exhausted. But a sudden, absolutely disgusting smell forced him to sit up and gasp for air. It was a filthy, crusty sock, and it definitely didn't belong to him. In that baffling instant, the truth of his rebirth washed over him. Fatty cheerfully claims that his insanely smelly sock did the trick. He tells David not to get mad, since it brought him back to reality. But David just stares in complete shock. He slowly climbs out of bed. He grabs Fatty by the shoulders, whispering that this is absolutely unbelievable. He shouts that they are alive, but Fatty has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. Fatty thinks he's just delirious. Suddenly, David pinches him hard. He needs to make sure his best friend is truly real and breathing. Fatty yelps and asks what he's doing, but David just pulls him into a tight, desperate hug. He is just incredibly relieved, but Fatty definitely misinterprets this sudden warm embrace. He cannot process this. Is it rebirth? Or time travel? Fatty still thinks his buddy has developed some highly questionable feelings. Fatty scrambles away, terrified. David looks around. He realizes with absolute shock that this is his old college apartment. He has traveled 8 years back in time, all the way to 2030. His head is throbbing with a brutal migraine, probably left over from that massive explosion. Then a sudden memory hits him. 8 years ago, he was still at the academy. This was the exact day he got brutally rejected by the girl he had loved for years. Heartbroken and depressed, he drank the night away. So that explains the massive hangover, but why did he have to return today? He cannot change the past now, but then a far more important realization hits him. If he has truly traveled 8 years back in time, then his beloved parents must still be alive. He frantically starts searching the messy apartment for his old cell phone. The place is a total disaster, but he quickly spots the device under his pillow. His chest tightens, his heart races. He stares at his sister Dina's contact name, but his hands start shaking. It is completely overwhelming. Put yourself in his shoes right now. Wouldn't your heart be racing? He knows he has to make this call immediately, but he still hesitates. He pinches himself hard to regain his focus. The sharp pain proves this is real. He is not used to this body yet. This physical form is a whole 8 years younger, filled with a strength he forgot he had. He slaps his own cheeks to snap out of it, then finally dials her number. Dina answers almost instantly. Hearing her voice after all these years completely freezes him. He cannot say a word. He holds the phone tight as she asks why he is calling her. He is just drinking in the sound of her voice, completely unable to speak. That means his parents are actually alive too. Then Dina brings him back to reality. She starts talking about Angela, reminding him that the girl is way out of his league. Dina is in the elite Federation Genius Club with Angela, so she knows the truth. She tells him straight, her brother is a decent guy, but Angela is completely out of reach. She tells him Angela is simply too good for him, Just then, Fatty walks in. Fatty thinks his buddy is struggling in love, and now his own sister is destroying him. But to Fatty's absolute shock, David does not get upset and only responds with incredible warmth. He tells Dina he is just happy to hear her and promises to visit. Dina thinks he finally gets it, but then she drops a harsh warning. She casually demands that her brother kick his annoying fat friend out of the apartment. She outright says just looking at his chubby face makes her want to beat him up. Magnus absolutely hates hearing that. David notices the tension and almost steps in too. Shut her down, instead, he unexpectedly says. That he will always love her. This completely catches Dina off guard. At first, she is utterly confused, then shock hits her. The girl genuinely starts to panic, convinced her brother is having a mental breakdown. Right in the middle of the day, to make things weirder, David adds that he does not like Angela, talk about a random, silly statement. Dina senses the heavy shift in his tone. She worries he is about to do something incredibly stupid. So she literally screams through the phone to Magnus, warning him that if anything bad happens to David, she will absolutely haunt Fatty for the rest of her days. Given David's temper, never going to happen. Secretly, she thinks it would be pretty great if Angela ended up becoming her sister-in-law. Meanwhile, David silently thanks Dina. Her chaotic call makes him realize he needs to reach out to their parents. Without wasting another second, he dials the family number. His father is the first to pick up on the other end. Sounding surprised, he asks why his son is calling so out of the blue, wondering if there is some kind of trouble, but David simply says he just misses them. His dad immediately invites him over for dinner this weekend, and his mother chimes in that he should not bury himself in books, especially with so many beautiful girls on campus. She then boldly asks when he will finally bring a girlfriend home, which leaves him feeling pretty embarrassed. His father quickly cuts in, telling David to ignore his mother's nagging. Because real men are built to do great things, but the wife swiftly shuts down her husband, reminding him he was only a retired kitchen squad commander. Laughing, they wish their son luck with his classes and once again invite him over for dinner before hanging up. David wishes them well. He lets out a deep breath, relieved. Making this call was incredibly tough. In his past life, he always wanted to hang up immediately. Now he wants to keep listening. Suddenly, his focus shifts to Magnus, who is happily reading a comic book. Staring at his heavy friend, David finds it hard to believe this chubby guy is destined to become the most elite squad shooter in their entire unit during the wars to come. He would fight by David's side on Mars, only to be the first to die. There has to be a way to prevent that horrifying tragedy. Inside this 20-year-old body lives a battle-hardened, unyielding soldier. He will absolutely think of something. But first, he needs to grab a hot meal. They eat dinner together and head to bed. Magnus passes out first, dreaming peacefully with a half-eaten snack beside him. David can hear him giggling in his sleep, but rest does not come easy. He lies awake, tossing and turning. He is deeply grateful to hear his family again, but a massive mystery remains. He has absolutely no idea how or why he was reborn. It had only happened to him. David realized tonight was starting out as a remarkably quiet night. But in just 5 years, this gentle peace would be utterly destroyed by a brutal alien invasion. When the war hit, humans were blindsided by alien fleets disguised as comets. Multiple critical cities across both the Earth and the Moon took massive, crushing hits right away. David remembered that devastating blow all too well. Humanity had simply been far too careless back then. They fantasized about alien life, but never truly expected a full-scale invasion. No one ever expected the threat to actually descend from the stars above their heads. When the invaders showed up, humanity fought back with everything they had, resisting fiercely. Constantly trading fire, they fought grueling daily battles during the initial phases of this global war. At first, humans held their own and even managed to gain a slight upper hand. However, everything shifted drastically during the critical showdown at the Kurtis Plateau. This was crucial for Mars, because humans let their guard down, northern Mars fell. The invaders quickly occupied the territory, sparking 3 long years of nonstop, brutal warfare on Mars. But during those 3 long years, the alien invaders only grew stronger and more adaptable. Learning human tactics, they eventually forced a crushing human defeat at Sun Lake. With Mars completely lost, humanity was pushed onto the defense after 2 vital nodes were shattered. The destruction by Comets left the human coalition completely unable to react in time. Key strongholds fell, and somehow, the enemy seemed to predict every single move they made. It was as if they knew human strategies beforehand, making David wonder about their secrets. Did these outsiders possess supernatural abilities, or was there a deeper mystery here? Recalling a strange phrase from the Moon People's Guide, he wondered if they had traitors among them. Every action has a reason, making potential betrayal seem highly logical. But if the Moon People really did betray them, what could possibly be their motive? David quickly dismissed these thoughts. Idle speculation was useless to him right now. He was nowhere near the top brass, making high-level intelligence completely out of his reach. Even with his knowledge of the future, he was currently powerless to change anything. Sitting tight seemed best for now, yet a lingering feeling told him something was deeply wrong. There was an internal rot within humanity, and he simply could not ignore it. Just then his eyes caught a bold poster plastered on the nearby door. It carried a striking English slogan urging everyone to fight for Earth, triggering an idea. What if he rose to upper management and accessed their classified archives? Back in military school, his mediocre grades made such a dream totally impossible. But things were different this time, and he had a real shot at the top. Playing his cards right, he could secure a spot in high command. With that kind of power, he could influence decisions and uncover the key to victory. But here is the catch. In 5 years, only the elite military academy graduates would lead. 5 years later, the top-performing students instantly became Earth's primary defensive force. Goofing off and acting reckless wouldn't save humanity from the upcoming slaughter. David knew he had to get completely serious. Meanwhile, his classmate Fatty was fast asleep. He dreamed of making classmates absolutely jealous of his gorgeous new girlfriend. In this vivid dream, he was with Lulu, his absolute favorite girl from the 3rd semester. Right after classes ended, they went straight back to his place for some privacy. Magnus gently led her into his bedroom, pulling her close in a warm embrace. He nervously reached for her zipper, while the blushing girl shyly told him to stop. But right at that perfect moment, his sweet dream was brutally interrupted. Suddenly, a monster interrupts, quietly sliding open his bedroom window. This massive werewolf bursts inside and roars, utterly terrifying both of them. He grabs Lulu suddenly. The terrified girl screams for Magnus to help her. But the guy just freezes in pure shock, giving the beast a perfect opening. With one swift kick, the monster sends Fatty flying across the entire room. Magnus has no clue where this beast came from, but he promises to save her. The werewolf has other plans, though, immediately turning back toward the open window. He is running. The monster wants to escape with his hostage. Magnus yells at the beast, telling it not to dare run with his beloved Lulu. Fatty leaps onto the wolf, desperately grabbing the claw holding his girlfriend. He tries to pry the fingers open, but it is completely useless. Then he realizes something. This is not a werewolf, it is actually a scaly, terrifying waterman. Magnus despairs because he has absolutely no idea how to fight a monster like this. But thankfully he suddenly wakes up, only to realize some things are still real. He wakes up with a jolt, shocked to find his hands are still tightly gripping something. It is not some swamp monster, but the hand of his very real roommate. David has no idea why Fatty is suddenly holding his hand like this. Honestly, it feels incredibly awkward, but David decides to stay quiet. He just stares at Magnus, silently asking what on earth is going on here. Still half asleep, the chubby guy suddenly screams that his friend has turned into a water monster. This bizarre accusation leaves David completely baffled as they sit there in awkward silence. Eventually, David cannot take the weirdness anymore and confronts his strange friend. He asks what Fatty is doing, wondering if he actually drowned himself in his sleep. Fatty jokes about being haunted by a ghost who died over some imaginary girl. But David points out that Fatty was just having a terrible nightmare. While his roommate was dreaming, David was actually up early practicing his physical training. He says a future soldier cannot afford to be lazy, which sounds highly disciplined. Fatty groans, saying his friend sounds just like a drill instructor. David silently reflects on how heartbreak feels like the end of the world when young. Eventually, it just becomes a distant memory. His own body feels completely different now. The massive changes mean it will take him quite a while to fully adapt. Comparing the genetic power potential between Earth and Mars is like night and day. This bizarre sensation is something only survivors of absolute hell could ever understand. Honestly, even his chubby roommate Magnus actually possesses a decent amount of talent. If he did not, there is no way he would have survived the final battle. He wonders what drives his friend to keep fighting on the battlefield. Only hatred, that is the one thing driving him forward. Shaking off these intense thoughts, he strips off his shirt and heads to the shower. Magnus can tell that his roommate is clearly bothered by something deep down. The fat man assumes David is working out to forget the pain of rejection. This is exactly why his fictional Lulu is the absolute best choice. Imaginary girls never cause this much drama. Satisfied, he reaches for his sweets. He grabs the bag of candy that always sits right beside his bed. Fatty has a very specific coping mechanism whenever life gets too stressful. He simply eats his feelings away, a fact David remembers all too well. That quiet support kept his friend going through every battle. Meanwhile, David heads into the shower to wash up, a regular daily routine on Mars. He takes another look at his muscular frame, realizing how much he can achieve now that he is in peak condition, a grueling massive triathlon and a 10-kilometer cross-country run when he peaked would be a total breeze. Meanwhile, his core system LN has recovered 40 to 50%. His body feels far stronger and more stable, but still, his raw genetic power still needs training before that mysterious, deep control can fully manifest. Honestly, it first surfaced back during the brutal war against the outsiders. In this day and age, genetically modified soldiers are completely normal, originally. To colonize Mars and the Moon, scientists started researching ways to re-engineer human genetics. Over time, this intense research yielded a massive breakthrough. It did not just solve the riddle of adapting to harsh alien environments, it unlocked the true, terrifying potential of mankind, which was an incredible milestone. Genetic tech finally turned deep space exploration into a reality, yet the Earth Federation maintained a highly conservative stance on genetic editing, choosing to rely more heavily on slow, natural evolution. They believed humanity needed more time to achieve the ultimate goal of interstellar adaptation. However, the citizens of the Moon took a far more radical approach, driven by their harsh, unforgiving environment, which demanded immediate survival. But while direct gene editing granted massive perks like boosted intelligence and rapid adaptation, it also triggered severe physical and mental defects, sparking intense global debate. Even so, the Moon dwellers bypassed this by pairing elite genetics, unlocking the supreme potential of mankind. They relied on natural selection and genetic self-regulation to ensure only the fittest survived. At their core, Earth and Moon shared the exact same vision, but one chose slow warmth while the other rushed into the fire. No matter, David knew his body was ready for the upcoming conflict. His main focus was letting his system adapt to the raw genetic power flowing through him. He needs to condition his muscles to perfectly handle this intense genetic force. For maximum effect, the path is simple. He just has to train until his baseline heart rate drops. Now, he truly understands his own terrifying potential. Because both factions heavily favor elite academies, the military schools are incredibly luxurious. Newcomers are always shocked, but the entry requirements are brutally high. Ultimately, the number one standard they measure is a cadet's genetic value. When David finally steps out of the shower, his chubby friend Magnus is thrilled because he is starving. The two quickly head to the cafeteria. The academy meals are top tier, and Magnus absolutely loves them. Still, David finds it a bit odd that his usually talkative buddy is completely silent about the food today. Instead, Magnus suddenly blurts out that David feels completely different. David wonders if his friend's dormant abilities are finally waking up, especially since he performed so well in the war. Curious, David decides to test the waters, asking what exactly looks different. Magnus just points to his own face, mentioning that subtle, confident smile. As the prime example, he can't explain it. Maybe David is just more handsome now, but this sudden compliment makes David pretty uncomfortable. Honestly, all those praises meant absolutely nothing to David, since he saw zero point in them. To the public, he was simply known as the reckless fool who dared to confess to the most popular girl in school. Meanwhile, he and Magnus finished a heavy breakfast. While hunting for an empty table, Magnus quickly noticed that everyone in the room was gossiping about David and whispering about his public love stunt. Online spaces were no different. Everyone believed this little drama would completely break his young confidence for a brief moment. Magnus actually found the online drama pretty amusing before letting out a heavy sigh. Looking at David, he complained that the younger generation had absolutely no respect for their seniors anymore, clearly talking about the two of them, but it just so happened that his loud words reached the nearby tables, making the crowd burst out laughing. Magnus flushed with red embarrassment. Suddenly, a furious girl, who was clearly annoyed by David's actions, marched right up to them. She snapped that his stupid public stunts had brought shame to their entire class. Her name was Catherine Seal, and she served as the class representative at their elite military academy. She was a close childhood friend to both David and Magnus. Holding the strict position of head girl for 4 long years now, David recalled how she would quickly rise through the military ranks after graduation, fighting against alien threats and becoming one of the youngest spaceship captains in history. To lead key battles, she and Magnus had stayed at the bottom of the military ladder initially. But that never stopped her from hanging out with them, just like old times. But as it turns out, the universe has a cruel way of treating brilliant talents. Her fleet was tragically overwhelmed and nearly wiped out during the Battle of Sun Lake. Ultimately, Catherine Seal fell in that brutal battle, defending her spaceship to the very end. That tragedy lay in the future. Right now, the young girl snapped him back to reality. Demanding to know why he was staring so intensely, stepping closer, she asked if he was really that eager to make them the laughingstock of the entire academy. David admitted she was right, knowing he had truly made a giant scene. Magnus stepped in, telling Catherine that David already regretted his actions. After all the laughter, the head girl turned back to David with a sharp glare. She asked if he had reflected on his mistakes enough to buy them 3 expensive lunches. Magnus immediately jumped in, adding that David should also be forced to wash his laundry for a whole week. Hearing this, David rolled his eyes and finally spoke up. He complained that this felt more like a robbery than actual comfort. Catherine smirked, admitting she wanted to console him, but his goofy grin made her change her mind. Magnus showed his version of support by demanding David's bank card password, claiming he would gladly handle all the payments. Listening to them joke, David remembered that in his past life, this exact moment had ended in a painful injury that caused him endless trouble. Looking back, being depressed over a girl like Angela seemed incredibly foolish. He was actually in a fantastic mood this time around. This fresh restart was a beautiful experience that he fully intended to thoroughly enjoy. Even the cafeteria food tasted amazing, because survivors of war know the true value of eating a simple meal in absolute peace. In the dark days of his future timeline, food supplies quickly dwindled into tasteless slop, incomparable to the warmth of peacetime dining. Turning back to Magnus, he joked that he had no money and the dirty socks could be left lying in the dormitory, so Catherine decided to change the subject. She asked if the guys should focus on their 3rd year, but Magnus replied that all graduates were basically the same. It did not make much difference what stamp he had on his diploma. He even admitted he admired David for not caring at all about his results, but he knew he should act fast and start taking his studies seriously to change things. Hearing this, Catherine shared his thoughts and said that diploma stamp is exactly what the army would look at when they finally enlisted. Magnus jokingly remarked that they were actually pretty lucky to have such a caring headmistress who worried about them. He added that he and David were hopeless, so they would rely on their big sister in the future. Catherine decided to play along, proudly declaring that she was already a member of the Iron Eagle fleet. That was a massive shock because this fleet was an army of elite aces, making it incredibly hard to join. But Catherine confidently claimed she could handle it. She told the boys to take better care of their own future. She asked if their scores were really just over 700, which really was not that impressive. She urged the guys to work hard these days, promising she might even help them out. They needed to aim for 800 points if they could make it to the Earth Elite competition. It would majorly boost their grades, regardless of whether they actually won anything or not. The guys loved the idea. David agreed she was right and promised to do everything he could to qualify. Hearing this, Catherine was pleased and praised his determination before turning to ask what Fatty thought about it. Fatty quietly replied that he would try to make it, but without much enthusiasm. Seeing his nod, she finally calmed down. Meanwhile, David decided to take a sip from his mug, only to realize he had forgotten the most important question. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he sheepishly asked when the big event would actually take place, needing to know how much time they had left. Catherine told him they had over a month, suddenly noticing that the guy had already cleared his plate. This came as quite a surprise to her, because he had taken a portion meant for a total glutton, yet he finished before Fatty did. Swallowing the last bun, David looked up in confusion, not getting her shock, and simply announced he was heading back for seconds. He returned almost instantly with a fresh plate piled high with buns, explaining that his intense physical training required a massive amount of daily calories. Just eating was not enough. He had to pack his stomach to last a long time. Minutes later, he was vacuuming down another meal, happily mentioning how great it was to live in peaceful times without war, but Catherine and Magnus did not understand his weird comment. Realizing he had let too much slip, David quickly tried to pivot, asking why they were barely touching their own food. Catherine sighed, saying she felt full just watching his massive appetite. She wondered how anyone could cram down that much food so quickly. Watching him, Magnus secretly worried his friend was just eating his feelings to cope with everything. In Fatty's eyes, this looked incredibly tragic and deeply painful to watch. He had only wanted to help David, but somehow taught him to eat away his grief instead. He quietly resolved to remind him not to lose hope. He focused on what lay ahead. Sooner or later, he would meet them and his girlfriend again. Catherine reminded him that real men need strength, urging him to focus on his score. David figured his friends were totally misreading his actions, as usual, but he just could not explain the truth to them yet. Meanwhile, Catherine Seal was back at the girls' dormitory of the Dragon Riding Academy, right near David and Magnus. Having wrapped up her current tasks, she felt pretty relieved that she finally made a firm decision. Looking over, her roommate asked if she had taken on too many classes once she saw the sheer size of the list. It was a massive lineup of every single course related to the Navy, and Catherine had selected every single one of them. She even recommended her roommate join her. But her friend quickly turned it down, saying that kind of workload was way too brutal. She joked that maybe the roles would flip, and she would end up protecting her instead. Down the road, since her roommate was training to become a professional navigator, Catherine pointed out how great that was. They would definitely need her skills. Still, she could not help but wonder what classes our main boys had picked, since those two required constant babysitting. Over in the boys' dorm at Dragon Letters. Back at the boys' dorm, they currently debated their choices. David hated his buddies' incredibly lazy, cram-heavy classes, but Magnus defended it, calling it a safe and perfect way to secure his graduation without working. Calling it a smart play, that was when David gestured to the figurine of the girl Fatty loved so much, the gorgeous Lulu. David told him his academic drive should match his obsession, suggesting shooting, but Fatty laughed, thinking his intense friend was just joking around. Two lazy slackers like them did not belong in high-level competitions. But David was dead serious. They had a month left to completely turn things around. If he was going to push himself to earn higher marks, then his buddy should do the same. But Fatty was not having it, silently wondering if David had somehow figured out his deepest secrets. Finally, David laid down a threat: if Magnus did not hit 800 points, his precious figures are getting sold. Talk about a brutal friend. Hearing this, Fatty asked if David had secretly been after Lulu this whole time, grumbling that getting rejected by a girl was no excuse to act so heartless. David had absolutely no clue what his friend was talking about and walked out onto the roof. Fatty figured the stress had finally scrambled his buddy's brain. He must have taken a massive psychological hit, going from hating school to completely losing his absolute mind. Deeply worried, Magnus carefully grabbed his favorite Lulu figurine. "No one is taking her away," he whispered, "because she is his entire world." Meanwhile, out on the roof, David knew he had barely a month left before the deadline. No big deal. Genetic power slept deep within everyone. Mastering its control was the ultimate key to unleashing that hidden strength. Armed with this knowledge, he could easily rise to become the absolute strongest warrior of this era, blowing everyone away with his power. First, he had to push his physical limits to the maximum. Before those weird outsiders arrived, he had to do it. 5 days later, they were standing right in the middle of the training stadium, ready to begin. David decided to prioritize his cardiovascular endurance first, starting with a grueling daily run. This time he was pushing hard for pure speed. Watching from the sidelines, Fatty turned to Catherine, muttering about how genuinely bad he felt for his overworking buddy. Everyone thought he was still moping over Angela's rejection, but David had bigger things on his mind. For days, he had only trained, eaten, and slept, never once feeling sorry for himself. Watching this, Magnus remarked that love had completely broken his friend since he had never acted this way before, not at all. Catherine argued that David had simply grown stronger, adding that Fatty seriously needed a change of pace too. She snatched his chips and tossed them away, ordering him to go train. Magnus did not see the point, especially since he already had over 700 points for the match. Catherine, however, ignored his excuses. She warned Fatty that she would not repeat her order again. Right then, he realized she was dead serious, rushing onto the track to join David while shouting that he would jog alongside him. David fired back, telling his buddy to remember that if he got overtaken, David would sell off his poster of his favorite cosmic goddess Lulu. Catherine smiled seeing them hustle, believing that if they kept this up, they would do incredibly well. Later that evening, inside the Dragon Riding School training hall, David kept pushing through his workout routine. He noted that Magnus was way too out of shape, having collapsed after only the 10th lap. The big guy complained he was done for, needing to crawl home to dream of his cosmic beauty, but David knew that they were in their 20s, which was the prime age for mastering genetic power. He absolutely had to secure 800 points for the tournament, because right now he only held slightly over 350, even if points did not prove true. Combat skills, the world still relied on these rankings to judge them. He had lost so many opportunities before due to his own stubbornness, but that was not happening again. Wrapping up his solo training, David stepped out and walked toward the main Dragon Riding School building. The point proficiency drills were finally starting, and the automatic system addressed the students. It instructed everyone to report to their designated areas. David headed straight to the sector for under 500 points, using his credentials. He registered at the terminal, which politely thanked him for cooperating. His check-in went through, but David only saw a cold screen telling him to train harder. His score was far below average, but he knew that stat line would change tonight. Suddenly, a very familiar voice caught his ear. Nearby, Angela was pleading with a senior to let her go. David froze, completely shocked to see her here. He wondered what she was even doing in this place. Meanwhile, the older student told her not to act so distant. His name was William. David could not help but think that the world was incredibly small, except this crossed the line into actual harassment. Just then, Angela spotted him. She noticed David watching and felt a wave of embarrassment. David instantly recalled that this pushy jerk William sat comfortably in the top 5 rankings, and his father was a powerful member of parliament. He was the classic rich, elite golden boy. David figured it was smart to keep out of it, turning to leave immediately. But Angela caught his movement and decided to use him as her shield. Out of nowhere, she grabbed his arm, catching him completely off guard, but her next words shocked him even more as she turned to William, claiming that the truth was Angela had eyes for only one guy, David, so she offered a quick apology. She wanted to avoid any misunderstandings. She meant every word, but William just stood in place, taking a moment to process the bomb she had dropped. He just could not believe this clown was actually her boyfriend. Honestly, it felt like a total prank. Still, William had to step in. He warned Angela not to shield herself with him. Everybody knew his past. After his recent antics, nobody respected him, yet Angela shocked the entire crowd. She claimed William did not have the full story because she never rejected David. Honestly, she just hated how he confessed. His execution was totally off. I mean, who strips naked instead of bringing flowers? That is just insane. Hearing this, David was stunned. He could not believe she defended him. It was beautiful. Her words instantly filled him with courage. Suddenly feeling bold, he pulled Angela close, pressing her against his side. He glared at William, calling him out for not acting like a proper gentleman. His smooth talking left Angela wondering if he had always been this incredibly eloquent. The crowd cheered. They fully backed his bold move. They agreed that William had definitely crossed a line. The older guy felt cornered. With so many witnesses around, he could not cause a scene, which deeply frustrated him. He hated seeing them together. No way could he stay. He turned to walk away, firing one final death glare at David as a threat. David did not even flinch, but Angela, she began to worry quite a bit. She tensed up, realizing William was not going to let this go easily. He would definitely pursue her again. His parting words urged her to choose wisely. With that final warning, he departed. Right then, Angela's friends called out to her. They wanted her to join them for dinner. She quickly turned back to David. He was still holding her tight, so she gently asked him to let go. He immediately pulled back, sheepishly admitting he had totally forgotten his arm was there. Angela saw right through him. Still, she never expected him to take it seriously. She wondered how an amazing girl like Dina ended up with such an idiot brother. Meanwhile, David was completely distracted by how incredibly soft her skin felt. He inhaled the sweet scent of her hair, totally captivated by her close presence. Angela cleared her throat, thanking him for playing along to rescue her. Before she could finish her sentence, David casually cut her off. He insisted no thanks were needed. Being her shield was no trouble at all. He excused himself, claiming he had urgent matters to handle before walking away from her. He left her standing there, completely stunned. His mind instantly shifted back to his score. He needed to verify if his points had increased yet, once the war began. The system would become useless. Today was his only chance to discover the truth. He had to rewrite history. For now, boosting his points was his main focus. Arriving at the designated office door, he took a breath and stepped inside. This exact room was where he planned to spend every waking hour from now on. To start off, he decided to review his options and access the main menu. The interface displayed an array of training matches, highlighting several combat modes. Seeing PvP options immediately caught his eye, but he paused. Fighting classmates right away would draw far too much unwanted attention. More like a beatdown. Just then, the basic training option caught his eye. He clicked it immediately, digging deep into the description details. Basically, it tested a soldier's limits by simulating brutal military conditions. Back in his past life, he absolutely despised these kinds of trials. It felt repulsive, but things were different now. He had tasted real war. So David chose this training option without a single second of hesitation. He confirmed his choice. The system welcomed David Hayden, a student of the academy. But since he had missed a whole month of training competitions, 10 points would be immediately deducted. This did not make him happy. Losing points for skipping, not exactly fitting for a future squad leader. Meanwhile, the control room completed the entire simulation setup. With the system initialized, he was cleared to enter. David threw on the specialized combat suit required to survive in this harsh environment. With the suit on, he took his seat. The system flared to life. Asking if the student was ready to begin, he gave a confident nod. Immediately, the system initiated the virtual immersion training copy. Now came the pain. Transfer coefficient set to a brutal 100%. The suit simulation started, making him feel like a real soldier standing directly on a brutal battlefield. The calibration finished. In just a moment, he would land on the Mars battlefield. They called this zone Magnificent Fireworks. Suddenly, David saw his new surroundings. He touched down perfectly. Nice to see his landing instincts were still sharp. It was pretty satisfying. Within moments, the system finished loading the simulation, revealing a massive swarm of enemy scout drones hovering right in front of him. Meanwhile, over in the boys' dorm for the school journalism department, daily life was grinding on. Students were scrambling to find hot stories for their freshman projects, but no one could find decent material. A student named Michael complained that this whole month felt totally dry. No good interviews, no viral clips, absolutely nothing exciting to report lately. On top of that, exams were looming, so everyone was just cramming hard. Everyone looked way too boring and formulaic. He had zero good stories, which is why he had been staring at the scoreboard for hours. Surely every single popular entry had already been picked clean for content. He would have to dig through the unpopular, failed attempts instead. So Michael got to work. Suddenly, an anonymous player caught his eye. This person was attempting the Magnificent Fireworks test at this very moment. The system showed the live feed, but that specific test used Mars as the battlefield. Only elite, top-tier master fighters ever dared to try it. And even those legendary players usually got wiped out almost instantly. It was pure foolishness to choose this test just to farm quick points. The guy was about to get brutally humiliated and kicked out in seconds. Wait, what? Michael noticed something that made his jaw drop. The pain setting was at 100%, absolutely terrifying. Meanwhile, David looked around, thinking the only thing missing here was the raw smell of blood. But the howling wind, the red dust, and the absolute brutal desolation. This was definitely the Mars battlefield, and he felt right at home. This run goes straight through a jagged gorge, a true path of pain. Heavy artillery pieces line the entire route, waiting to blow him to pieces. Beyond the sudden, blinding shots blasting from around every single corner. There are far worse threats hiding in wait, devastating traps lurk everywhere. Hidden induction mines can tear off a leg in a second. Luckily, David knows. Every single dirty trick of the battlefield, it gives him a massive edge. Before the timer starts, a 1-minute preview shows the terrifying trajectories. Michael watches with a smirk, fully expecting a swift failure. But David remains completely calm. He zeroes in on his starting position, ready. Every single laser coordinate is already locked into his memory. He is ready. He charges ahead, legs pumping. The first deadly mines come into view instantly. Yet to Michael's absolute shock, the kid does not even slow down. He weaves through the explosions with terrifying grace. Next, the lasers fire. Searing red beams rain down from above, but they cannot touch him either. He slides around the sharp bends, predicting every blast perfectly. Not a single scratch on him, then he suddenly slides to a halt. He remembers this specific zone requires dodging in place, no room to run. He stares down the massive artillery batteries lining the walls. He knows their spots. They unleash a devastating barrage directly at his face. One hit means agony. He knows the simulation pain is very real. He cannot afford to slip up. With perfect timing, he leaps into the air, safe, but the path goes deeper. He must find a way past the next heavy defensive line ahead. Massive photon cannons block the road. Luckily, they have one fatal flaw. They cannot track targets in midair. Just as he predicted, their sensors miss him. He sails right over the live barrels, keeping up his relentless pace. But those cannons are already pivoting to lock onto his back. Time to move. Right on cue, the massive weapons unleash another blinding salvo into the narrow gorge. The ground erupts behind him, yet David is already way ahead of the blast. The heat washes over him, but he remains completely untouched and sprinting forward. Can we get a quick reality check here? Mike's jaw is on the floor. This student just cleared 70% of the run. Keep in mind this path is 100 meters of absolute death. Surviving even a fraction of this is insane. But clearing 70%, absolutely legendary, yet David is not done showing off. Between insane dodges, he actually has the energy to strike back at the turrets. He smashes them for extra points. Michael can barely believe his eyes. This kid is playing at a level that is straight-up superhuman. David keeps weaving through the multiplying waves of photon fire. The deeper he goes, the thicker the lasers get, but he is unfazed. He survived a literal war zone before this. This simulator is nothing to him. A blinding beam suddenly grazes past his eyelashes, missing by a millimeter. Watch this, Michael is sweating, just watching the kid push through. He is basically at the finish line now. Is this really just one student? It feels like an entire military squad is tearing up the course. But it is just David, closing in on the final, most brutal stage. Suddenly, the rocky ground begins to violently shake. Something massive is coming. That was his move, but things immediately took a highly unexpected turn, forcing him to work hard, because what he saw next made even Michael yell that they needed to stop this test immediately. David stared as massive chunks of earth suddenly hovered in midair. Blasted upward from deep underground, Michael frantically questioned the system, demanding to know what insane challenge this was, but David was highly surprised too, never having seen anything like this. Even on the battlefields of Mars, suddenly a violent strike came. It was far quicker and more powerful than the previous assaults, yet he managed to slip past. Like always, he needed to devise a strategy fast. David locked his focus onto his foe. He was facing a real monster now. He charged straight ahead while evading deadly projectiles aimed directly at him. David was literally leaping across falling stones in midair. Watching this, Michael was completely blown away. Nobody should be able to glide through the air like that. But he didn't realize David was destined to be the future leader of the Bloodwolf Squad, making this look pretty easy. Michael could only shake his head, wondering how any normal person could jump like that, but the beast wasn't stopping. It immediately unleashed another relentless volley of searing laser beams directly at him. A beam grazed his ear before he could fully react. It was just too fast. Still, he was agonizingly close to reaching his final landing spot. He was right on the verge of clearing the canyon, but that sudden injury threw off his timing, disrupting his leap. He slipped. Michael saw the hit had stolen his momentum, meaning he was going to fall short. This was getting incredibly dangerous. David knew it too. Luckily, he managed to grab the cliff edge. With a desperate grip, his arm was cut up and his ear was bleeding. But he was not giving up. He dragged himself upward, holding onto the jagged rocks to avoid falling back down. Then he made a final desperate leap, hoping to finally reach solid ground. He actually made it. But the monster launched one last, desperate strike right at him. The energy beam split into 3 deadly lasers, but David gracefully dodged them all. The end of this nightmare was finally close. Only 10 meters remained. He was absolutely sure he could break through this last stretch. He kept his distance, waited for his moment, and spotted the finish line. But one final, incredibly tough obstacle stood directly between him and victory. It was a dense maze of lasers, impassable even for the fastest soldier. David knew relying on pure human speed alone here would be a mistake. To Michael's absolute shock, the guy adjusted his stance and calmly approached the deadly grid, carefully analyzing its pattern. He stepped forward, weaving around each beam. Michael's glasses literally slid down his face. This level of extreme flexibility was unreal. David knew that only lightning-fast reflexes and absolute focus could get him through this alive, and sure enough, he made it. He reached the finish line, the portal gate. All he had to do now was step right through. He did, and the system booted right back up. David's screen lit up with various notifications about his massive breakthrough rewards. He landed an epic rating, a result that made him incredibly happy. He could finally shed his heavy gear. Meanwhile, Michael watched in absolute disbelief. He couldn't believe his eyes. This was actually happening. This student had just cleared the Mars battlefield at 100% difficulty. Michael wondered who this guy was, since he'd never seen anyone so monstrous. Fortunately, Michael's screen recorder captured the entire insane struggle from start to finish. But that final look from the kid felt like death itself was staring back. It sent shivers straight down Michael's spine. Still, his identity remained a total mystery. He had no idea which school the student attended, making it impossible to trace him. Suddenly, a loading screen confirmed the video had successfully synced up. Michael panicked for a second, fearing he had missed his chance since the stream ended. With a trembling hand, he clicked on the file to check the recording. He desperately needed to see if the entire crazy run had actually been saved. Thankfully, every second was there, meaning he had some absolute gold on his hands. Honestly, Michael didn't view David as some savior. He felt more like a demon. What this student did simply defied all logic and common sense. From start to finish, a suffocating aura of destruction followed him everywhere. And it didn't come from the test itself, but from David. Michael used his journalism skills to whip up a report in under 20 minutes. Soon, news about this mystery student passing the trial spread like wildfire. Based on the chatter around him, the whole department was already talking. Within just 5 minutes, major military academies were absolutely blowing up with messages. Everyone wanted to know what kind of monster they were dealing with. Michael wondered if some school was using this beast as their ultimate trump card. It was the perfect way to make a statement before the big tournament. After all, nobody had ever achieved an epic rank on the Mars test before. The previous record was only high minus, so he basically skipped 2 whole tiers. Meanwhile, David felt he still made way too many mistakes during the run. He realized those minor slip-ups probably cost him a higher Epic Plus rank rating. Even so, breaking the record immediately netted him 100 points, which was awesome. Still, the young man realized he couldn't afford to celebrate just yet. He still had no clue how long it would take to reach 800 points. Meanwhile, over at the library of the Dragon Writing School, students gathered. Sitting among the crowd was Angela, looking incredibly annoyed by all the noise. The entire hall was buzzing with excitement, completely ruining her quiet time. Everyone was gossiping about the absolute madman who broke the Mars trial record. Honestly, even she couldn't help but feel a little curious about it. Since everyone was talking about it, she decided to check things out. Pulling out her phone, she opened the school's online forum to find the truth. But the sheer scale of the news caught her completely off guard. She stared at the posts about this mysterious, unnamed freshman conquering the trial. Both the Earth and Moon Federations had their own ranking systems, and this student. This test raised the bar quite nicely for Earth, with the Moon planet having an even higher standard. That difficulty peaked at higher levels, making the upcoming Mars test a brutal challenge. Surviving that epic-ranked battlefield was easily the hardest test on either planet. Because of this, everyone thought passing it was completely impossible. Even Angela tried, but she was left in total despair. To her, only a god could pass a stage that insane. And that was exactly how David looked to them now, a deity. Meanwhile, everyone was whispering about why the footage of his run had not leaked yet. Angela was highly curious too, wanting to see what kind of monster could pull this off. Especially since some thought he was just a dirty cheater. Pretty wild claim, right? They expected the hype to end in a massive farce, so a few guys gathered in Michael's room. They wanted to brainstorm a clever way to get their hands on that legendary walkthrough video. They figured only the recorder or the player himself could have uploaded it. Annoyed, Michael asked why they had to hold this dumb meeting in his private room. He definitely had not agreed to this, but the guys quickly shut down his complaints. They reminded him that he was the very first to lose his mind over the news. He always sniffed out the craziest gossip first, yet Michael just stayed completely silent. Finally, one of them shrugged, suggesting the entire video was probably just a cheap fake anyway. After all, when you think about it, beating a stage like that is genuinely impossible. Right then, Michael raised his hand. He actually had the clip. The guy who called it a fake laughed, thinking Michael was just pulling a cheap bluff. But looking at his face, they could tell Michael was dead serious about this. The three friends stared in utter shock, realizing their buddy was not joking around. They instantly pounced on him, demanding to know why he had kept it a secret. Michael told them to chill out as they desperately begged him to play the recording. They had to see it for themselves, but Michael hesitated for a brief second. Taking his silence as a green light, the guys got incredibly hyped up. They practically ripped the laptop right out of his hands to find the video. They had to see the legendary player who cleared the impossible stage. But Michael snatched his computer back, snapping that this recording was his property. The guys started begging like crazy, even offering up their most prized possessions. Within seconds, they were crowded around the screen as Michael prepared to press play. He warned them that he would be the one publishing the clip later. They quickly agreed and he clicked play, revealing a rocky canyon on the screen. Standing in that massive gorge was David, and his movements immediately blew them away. What really shocked them was his total lack of fear in such a dangerous place. But when David turned and stared straight into the lens at the very end, they all got instant goosebumps. There was something terrifying about him. A raw, murderous aura rolled off the screen, and one guy physically recoiled. He backed away in terror, asking if that beast was even a real human. The others nodded, knowing they would have died within seconds in that hellhole. Yet David made it look easy, showcasing a level of strength they had never seen. They were completely mesmerized by his power, unable to look away from the screen. Even Michael, watching it for the second time, felt his heart pounding in sheer awe. That crushing pressure had not faded, not one bit. It would be absolutely incredible if this fighter actually turned out to be from Earth, but something told him this mysterious warrior was definitely an Earthling, or at least a student from Earth's military academies. Before long, the club members completely lost their minds. Looking at this brilliant student, everyone wishing they could be like him, they even completely forgot about Michael, who had to remind them all that he actually recorded this footage. So Michael understands the situation. Even so, he still makes up his mind to publish the video at last, which makes everyone incredibly happy. After all, an epic clash like this must be seen by every student at Dragon Academy, and it would surely bring massive recognition to their journalism department. With that settled, the club members upload the footage online. It is late at night, but despite that, views begin piling up at a lightning-fast speed. By the next morning, the entire campus buzzes with nothing but this video. Talk about an instant viral sensation. Students from every single department scramble to watch it, dying to see the face of this legendary warrior. Even the female students are hooked, although over in the girls' dormitories, the massive news travels just a little bit slower. Catherine looks outside her quiet room. Having just woken up, she cannot comprehend what all this crazy commotion is actually about. The loud environment makes it impossible to focus, and yet she desperately needs to write down some notes. She clears her throat and prepares to start. But noise outside interrupts her again. The constant disturbance is starting to heavily irritate Catherine, completely preventing her from focusing on the urgent task she must finish. After another failed attempt, she finally snaps, unable to take it, and decides to investigate the commotion. Getting thoroughly annoyed, she slams her fist hard against the wooden table. It is incredibly frustrating that everyone outside keeps yelling about some mysterious test. Catherine yells, demanding how anyone can possibly concentrate in this chaos, and her room bursts her roommate. The girl tries to calm her angry friend, promising to show her something incredibly fascinating while holding out her personal phone. At first, Catherine completely misunderstands, assuming that she and her roommate simply have different tastes, but her roommate vigorously shakes her head. She claims it is something they will both absolutely love, though the underlying vibe of the topic clearly has not shifted away from handsome guys. The roommate eagerly confirms this, whispering that this particular guy is an absolute beast who could easily charm anyone, but Catherine replies that she has absolutely no interest in watching, yet her persistent roommate refuses to back down, quickly pulling up the live recording of the Mars battle. Highlighting that legendary peak ranking score, Catherine merely sighs, claiming she already knows about the event. Still, her close friend Clara firmly insists on hitting play anyway. Together, they lean over the small screen to watch the video. As it ends, Catherine is left deeply impressed by this mysterious student. His sharp movements are incredibly fluid and admirable. Clara agrees completely. She always admires exceptionally powerful fighters, and this student is her absolute ideal. Catherine contemplates his jaw-dropping reaction speed and his genius ability to analyze the battlefield. She wonders what grueling training he went through to master such terrifying composure under fire. Honestly, it is mind-blowing that such a formidable, monster-like fighter even exists. On top of that, his final cold glare exuded an eerie, calculated calmness. Primal battle hunger. The girl silently prays she will not cross paths with him during the early points tournament phases, because he will undoubtedly be competing there. She honestly felt like no matter who stood against him, absolutely nobody could ever stop this guy. Clara, however, was busy swooning over how incredibly handsome he was, completely ignoring the fact that he might actually be her opponent. She felt like every single cell in her body was ready to surrender to him. She wondered what he looked like. Meanwhile, Fatty tried containing his thoughts. It was his big day, so he had to keep it together. He made sure everything was ready, even crafting a homemade cheer flag. He also packed a limited edition nanoroid, a bunch of posters, and other accessories. All this was to secure an autograph from Lou Manley, who he lovingly called his goddess Lulu. Meanwhile, David stepped out of the shower. He noticed the noise starting again and thought about inviting a friend over. Dinner sounded perfect. After all, anything was better than letting him act crazy. Back then, after David invited his friend over for dinner a few times, the guy basically started following him everywhere like a lost puppy. This lasted right up until he joined the army, so David asked him if he wanted to come over for dinner tonight, but Magnus replied that today was his big day, something he had anticipated for 2 whole months. David advised him to finally confess his feelings to his goddess, because even a rejection would still be a highly valuable experience. He felt a bit uneasy that after all these years, his friend was still so dedicated, but Magnus replied that just looking at her was enough, because loving someone did not mean possessing them. Hearing this, David stopped his teasing since he still needed to focus on earning points. Anyone who fails to reach 800 points before the big match has to wash socks for both of them, which Fatty absolutely hated. David said he was heading home for dinner, telling his buddy to stay calm. Around his goddess, Magnus did not even have time to answer before David was already on the subway heading home. His parents lived right near the nearest station, which meant he made it back home pretty quickly. Right at the front door, he caught the mouthwatering scent of fresh fish stew cooking. Nobody in the world could cook that dish quite like his dad. Once David stepped inside, the aroma grew even stronger, leaving him with absolutely no doubts. Right then, his father walked around the corner and noticed his son had returned. He smiled, saying David had a good eye, and pointed out how this girl actually looked a lot like his mother back when she was young. David had no clue what his father meant and wanted to ask, but his mother suddenly interrupted him. That was when he noticed something. She was wearing makeup, making him even more curious about what was happening. Seeing his wife, his dad rushed back to finish cooking before she got angry, and that's when David noticed they had an unexpected guest. Wait, who? Dina popped her head out from behind their mother with a huge grin, teasingly telling her brother to look at who was visiting them. David turned his head and his face instantly flushed bright red. Standing there was none other than Angela. She raised her hand with a sweet hello. She looked as charming as ever. Meanwhile, back at the American campus, over at the college, students also gathered to watch the broadcast of that impossible exam. They all agreed that nobody could have cleared even half of it, leaving them completely stunned. Everyone was shocked. The fact that the entire world watched David proved something major. It proved that Michael's grand plan was a massive hit. Meanwhile, the live views on the stream instantly shattered every single record for top news of the week. The next day, Magnus sat in front of his PC, ready to watch his favorite space idols. After all, yesterday's chaos surrounding the new expert completely ruined his peaceful viewing time. It was pretty annoying. Honestly, this big guy only cared about two things: food and girls. So all the wild hype about the martial arts expert did not really interest him. Meanwhile, David stood completely frozen in absolute shock because of who showed up. The girl he liked was standing right there in front of him. He glanced at his little sister, knowing she had to be behind this, and she just gave him a playful wink. He realized Angela had never visited his house in his previous life, meaning things were changing. The timeline was shifting. He was only able to actually meet Angela because of Dina, who had somehow managed to get close with the popular rich kids at school. Seeing her up close again made him so flustered that he forgot to even greet her. Angela noticed and asked with a sweet smile why he was ignoring her again. David scrambled for an excuse, trying to play it cool despite his racing heart. He stammered that seeing a beautiful fairy visit their home left him completely speechless. It was a pretty smooth line, until his mother suddenly yelled for him to help his father. Saved by the bell, David peeked into the kitchen, where his dad was prepping some fish. He offered to take over, but of course, Dina could not resist teasing her older brother. She smirked, warning Angela that David's cooking was bad enough to scare her away. David shot back that her own skills were not exactly something to brag about. Putting his sister in her place definitely backfired because she instantly went into whiny mode. She yelled to their mom, complaining that David was picking on her again. Talk about a cheap trick. Naturally, their mother immediately sided with her daughter. She glared at David with a terrifying look that made him sweat. He quickly retreated. Slipping into the kitchen, he urged his dad to go rest and leave the rest to him. His father had once shown him how to make fish stew. David knew the steps by heart. His father watched him work with a look of surprise. Proud of his son's focus, Mr. Hayden smiled as David offered him a taste. He took a bite and his eyes widened in pure shock. It was absolutely delicious. He admitted his son had surpassed him, warmly praising David's incredible cooking skills. David smiled, reflecting on how rare it was to actually cook for his family. Now he could put the cooking skills he perfected on Mars during the war to use. Soon the meal was ready, and he quickly brought the hot dishes out. Everyone was already gathered at the dining table, eagerly waiting to eat. David handed out the chopsticks, wishing everyone a wonderful meal. He gently urged Angela to try the hot food first, serving her a piece. Watching this unfold, Dina was completely shocked by how incredibly sweet her brother was being. But David was too focused to notice his sister's suspicious, prying stare. He placed another piece on Angela's plate, insisting one was not enough. Dina realized that at this rate, they would end up on a date tomorrow. That was definitely not part of her plan. Soon, the cozy dinner came to an end. By dinner time, everyone has to admit David has become a much better cook. His parents announce they are heading out for a quick walk to digest. The kids are left to clear the table. Outside, his parents immediately start gossiping about Angela, wishing that David would finally start dating her. Back inside, David and Dina finish the cleaning. His sister wastes no time. Immediately flopping onto the bed, no shame, David offers Angela an apple. She says yes, but Dina declines and suddenly springs up from the bed. Heading straight to her room, she claims a classmate just called her. Giving them some space to chat, once she leaves, David realizes his sister did this entirely on purpose to leave him alone with Angela. But he knows she cannot be his soulmate, no way. And being this close to her only makes her charms stand out more. But he cannot give in to temptation. He must focus on his mission, rewriting the future and stopping the alien invasion. David finishes peeling the fruit and hands the slices to Angela, who politely thanks him for his effort. Taking a slice, she asks if it was okay for her to drop by so suddenly. David is quite thrown off by this, staring back at her in silence. As the girl takes a bite, she remembers how easily flustered he used to be. But not long ago, he was totally flustered in front of her. Yet a week later, he perfectly played along with her to fool William. Angela suddenly realizes with surprise that she is actually starting to feel charmed. Meanwhile, David reassures her that dropping by like this is completely fine. After all, she is his sister's best friend, no big deal. His parents got the wrong idea, but he promises to set things straight later. Hearing this, Angela simply smiles and mentions his parents are actually pretty sweet. David averts his eyes, focusing back on the apples in front of him. She does not seem bothered by any of this, which leaves him speechless. To break the silence, he just starts peeling again, smooth. Angela notices his peeling technique is incredibly fast and precise. That is definitely not a skill an ordinary student should possess. David takes a bite of his apple, savoring a rare luxury from his war days. Back on Mars, fresh fruit was non-existent. He would have gladly eaten rotten apples. He would even gladly settle for a basket of rotten ones back on Mars. Angela, meanwhile, quickly finishes her fruit and sets her plate down. She clears her throat, admitting she actually came over to ask for help. But now that the moment has come, she struggles to find the right words. David seems to catch on instantly and asks if she needs a shield. He asks if she wants him to act as her part-time shield. The girl agrees, mentioning they are schoolmates and she really needs his help. She promises to meet any reasonable conditions for this crucial upcoming competition. Suddenly, David gathers his courage, time to make a move. He asks her why she does not just make it a permanent gig. Hearing this, Angela instantly blushes red at his incredibly direct offer. She blushes, stammering that she cannot promise anything just yet. But she softly adds that maybe she will change her mind in the future. Angela realized she made a minor slip today. It felt like she was completely out of sync. She just could not keep up with the conversation. Right then, David stood up. He cleared his throat and claimed it was just a joke, though his mom should never find out. A simple thank you would be plenty, he said, but maybe she could buy him a meal sometime. Angela liked this offer a whole lot better. She agreed immediately and offered her hand. They shook hands on it, finalizing their deal. She was totally fine with that arrangement. David did not fully get his own motives, but he wanted to hang around her more. He just wanted another excuse to see Angela. Honestly, his reckless youth was long gone. This was really just a bit of sweet nostalgia for his younger years. Outside the room, his sister Dina was leaning against the door, trying to eavesdrop. But it was dead silent. Dina knew this rare chance might never come around again. If she ruined things now, it was over, so she resolved to walk right in. She needed to check on her brother. Quietly, Dina pushed the door open. Peeking around the corner, she spotted David and Angela deep in a serious discussion. It was pretty disappointing for Dina. Her brother had a perfect shot here. He could have made Angela feel so comfortable, but instead he was focusing on this. They were literally analyzing a complex strategy document for their elite club. Talk about a total mood killer. There was absolutely zero romance in the air. Dina figured her brother would fail hard since their club curriculum was incredibly tough. It was way beyond his level, but things were about to take a shocking turn. Angela actually expected him to struggle too, but he completely blew those expectations away. David understood every single detail. She watched him analyze it with ease. He effortlessly broke down the key elements and solved the entire strategic plan. This brilliant mind did not match the clumsy guy who confessed to her last week. She could not wrap her head around it. How was this even possible? Dina had explicitly told her that David was a terrible student. Angela wondered if he simply lacked the training to unleash his true potential. Spotting her deep in thought, David asked if he had made some sort of mistake. Angela quickly shook her head, feeling a little flustered. She denied it immediately. She admitted that his analysis was perfect. Then, she hastily changed the subject. Angela pulled up her screen, wanting to discuss a completely different topic. A viral recording of a recent Mars battlefield walkthrough was her next exhibit. An anonymous pro had pulled off this wild run, and she asked if he knew about it. David confirmed that he had. Angela insisted that the video was practically a textbook. The way this anonymous fighter moved was basically a perfect combat textbook. A A student from journalism caught the footage and uploaded it to the school forum. She told David he should definitely look it up and study it closely. He needed to watch the expert's sharp reactions, split-second habits, and tactical thinking. She pointed out that talent runs in families. He had to be as gifted as Dina. With the right guidance, Angela was certain that David could become incredibly strong. She playfully winked at him. David blushed, totally unprepared for such direct praise. Such open affection was totally new to him. Was he dreaming? Smiling, David accepted the compliment. Angela nodded in agreement, looking pleased. She realized it was getting late and announced that she should head home. After a quick pause, David stood up and offered to walk her out. She smiled at him warmly, thanking him for his concern as they left. Angela lived in a dormitory close to the subway, keeping their walk short. David waved goodbye, warmly telling her she should absolutely visit again during her free time. After making sure she boarded the subway safely, the young man turned and headed back home. He kept pondering the situation until he opened the front door to see Dina. She looked incredibly unhappy about something and immediately began grilling him. She asked if he really just walked her to the station despite having such a great opportunity. To Dina, her clueless brother clearly understood absolutely nothing about romance. How hard was it to visit her dorm? David answered with a shrug. Those weekend hours were incredibly precious to him, and he wanted to play chess with his father. This unexpected response left Dina staring at him in complete disbelief. She could not understand how David remained so calm when Angela practically offered to be his girlfriend. But David rejected the idea, explaining that he was merely acting. A shield occasionally, and would never become more than a platonic friend. His sister had absolutely nothing to worry about, and he swiftly changed the entire subject. Pointing at Dina, he noted she lost weight, teasing that at this rate her ribs would soon be visible, causing the furious girl to pounce on her mischievous brother. She ordered him to stop dodging the subject with that smirk. She did all this to help, but David simply patted her head. He softly told her she should not worry, before suddenly dropping a quiet truth bomb. Truth be told, Angela simply was not his type, and Dina realized he was not joking. She demanded to know who his actual crush was if Angela did not qualify. But her brother shut down the topic with a sudden, blunt response. A man must focus entirely on his career, and he was determined to reach the 800 mark. Dina assumed her brother had a fever, jokingly offering to find a psychiatrist. Their parents walked in right then, and Dina immediately started teasing him again. She certainly did not miss the perfect chance to get their mother highly involved in his life. After sitting with the family for a bit, David announced he had to head out for class. His father looked stunned, usually having no trouble beating him blindly at chess. This match actually marked his father's very first defeat, proving the boy's tactics had vastly improved. The father certainly noticed the sharper tactics. His mother saw a change too. Normally, he would zone out completely when she started nagging him about daily choices. But now he patiently listened to her endless grumbling with a very warm, bright smile. Even Dina noticed it, since she usually ruled over him. Were enough to intimidate her brother, making his parents wonder what caused this massive change. Honestly, you can't blame his parents for thinking he was in love. They even began wondering what would happen if their stubborn Dina fell in love, staring in awe. The girl just stuck her tongue out, claiming romance did not interest her. Dating did not interest her. Soon, a new day came. They attended an observational lecture where he and Magnus normally slept. This time only Fatty kept sleeping, while David remained completely alert. He listened with absolute focus as the screen displayed the massive USS Iron Eagle. This was the exact ship Catherine had always dreamed of piloting, representing the very best in technology. Released less than a decade ago, David knew the vessel incredibly well. He had actually served aboard the vessel during the height of the war. The specific ship being shown in the lecture is absolutely trashed. Professor Cababrio explains that this very model was one of 3 destroyers. Sent to explore Pluto 6 months ago, but the entire fleet along with their signal back to headquarters completely vanished, leaving the mystery unsolved. This missing warship is the main topic of today's lecture. Military patrols recently spotted it drifting just outside the solar system. Sightings are flooding in that lost battleship from 6 months. Go is now a literal ghost ship. Suddenly, David notices something familiar. The severe decay on the hull looks exactly like a certain threat. A standard wormhole could never cause this, let alone a temporary rift. It looks exactly like the corrosive fluids produced by the alien invaders. Any human technology hit by that substance dissolves instantly, just like this. But wait, the official alien invasion is still 5 years away. It means the enemy has already found humanity. David starts muttering his wild theories out loud without realizing it. His muttering wakes up Fatty and grabs the attention of the professor. David realizes that the sudden alien onslaught was planned years in advance. Their intelligence must be far beyond what humanity expects. They are not mindless beasts, they are highly strategic, brilliant creatures. His racing thoughts are cut short by Professor Cababrio. The professor calls David out, claiming his face shows he has objections. Cababrio reminds him that he is the only student who failed last term. He orders the boy to stand up and present his ideas to the class. To the absolute shock of everyone present, David actually gets up to speak. Magnus whispers that he should at least pretend to pay attention. The guy is already an eyesore to the entire teaching staff. The other students snicker, remembering him as the guy who confessed to Angela. But David ignores the laughing and stands with complete confidence. He rises from his seat, looking like he actually has something to say. He directly tells the professor that all 3 destroyer theories are pure nonsense. Cababrio is stunned, never expecting the slacker to talk back. The entire classroom bursts into uncontrollable laughter at David's absolute audacity. They cannot believe a failing student is questioning the professor. Cababrio assumes the boy is just trying to disrupt his lecture. So he tells the boy that they are all eager to hear his opinion. Cababrio says they will all listen to his brilliant take on the situation. He hopes for a rational explanation, not some childish alien fantasy. Catherine, standing near the front, wonders why this guy loves trouble. She sighs, but David just keeps a calm smile on his face. He plans to completely blow the professor away with actual facts. He points out that while a primitive wormhole is highly destructive, the second slide clearly shows undeniable signs of biological corrosion. Those acidic rust stains have absolutely nothing to do with gravity wells. The theory about temporary tunnels is just straight science fiction. If that were the case, the ship would be completely crushed by now. Take number 6, the destroyer's hull still had some operational capacity. As for the mirage theory, it sounds probable, but it is also completely wrong. David declared this so confidently that the entire room fell silent. The professor thought that, based on the evidence, the mirage theory was indeed the most plausible explanation. But since this kid just shut it down, how would he explain it? Normally, nobody paid attention to these tiny details, but David brought it up anyway, going on to say that if you look at the geographical location in the 5th slide, you can clearly see this sector lies on the edge of the solar system, and as they know, battleships cannot operate that far out, so how could mirages even exist there when no nearby sectors have that function? The other students got highly skeptical, demanding to know how he understood multidimensional projection theory. David just waved his hands. Because he really had no idea, he was just speaking from experience. Then another student chimed in, realizing David's points actually made total sense. Professor Cababrio quickly paused the debate for another time. Since class was almost over, they quickly moved on to the next topic, which wrapped up 15 minutes later with the bell. Soon, the crowd of students flooded out of the lecture hall. David turned to leave too when the professor suddenly called his name, asking where he had heard those wild theories. In response, David asked if the professor believed a creature was aboard that ship. Cababrio realized David had made quite an impression today. But now he was just slipping right back into alien conspiracy theories. Still, the kid had spoken with such deep conviction, it made him pause. Then the professor decided to tease him, tapping David lightly on the head and warning him not to lose his mind to sci-fi fantasies, but to focus on his coursework. Honestly, you can't blame them. People raised in peacetime simply can't comprehend a massive alien threat. Besides, nobody knew where they came from. Maybe they engineered massive wormholes opening right inside the solar system. David kept wondering if some unknown force had helped the invaders pinpoint their precise coordinates. Lost in thought, he walked toward the main campus building until Catherine blocked his path, warning him to stop bugging the professor. Just then, Magnus strolled over, chiming in to remind them that lunchtime was fast approaching, so the trio headed to the Cafeteria. There, David piled his tray high to fuel his intense training routine. Magnus stared, asking why his friend was constantly gorging himself on food. When everything cost so much money, Magnus, who was perpetually flat broke, felt uncomfortable at the sheer amount of cash David was blowing on meals. He warned that at this rate, David would end up completely broke by midterm, but David brushed it off. Catherine, too, was baffled by his bottomless stomach, asking how he could eat triple the amount of a normal person. David awkwardly muttered that his exercise routine had recently tripled. He wanted to offer some excuse so they wouldn't assume he was eating away his feelings. But his time was up. Suddenly, a huge commotion erupted near the entrance of the dining hall. All eyes turned to Angela, who had just walked in. For lunch, the three friends sat frozen, staring right at her with completely. Their eyes locked with a different intensity, but David's gaze held no warmth or love. Catherine instantly recognized her as the elite girl ranked in the top 10 of the Earth Federation. With over 2,000 points, she was a third-year elite. Her influence and authority on campus had already grown massive. Meanwhile, Angela spotted David and smiled, stepping directly toward their table. Nearby, the rest of the students watched with intense curiosity, fully expecting a major scene to unfold. Catherine felt uneasy, assuming the ranked star was heading over just to cause David trouble. She definitely did not like this, but Angela simply walked up to their table and politely asked Fatty if she could join them, talk about an unexpected twist. The watching crowd grew more and more eager to see what kind of drama was playing out. David figured he should just play along with her little game. He calmly asked his friend to yield his seat to their junior guest. Fatty quickly read the room and slid over to Catherine's side, leaving Angela to sit right next to David. She smoothly asked Catherine what they were discussing, and Magnus chimed in that it was a fun topic. Privately, Angela knew she needed these minor players to successfully use David as her shield. Catherine was clearly the key to this, though she just stared at David in total disbelief. Magnus decided to take charge of the conversation, teasing that something incredible had just happened. He proudly exaggerated the lecture incident, making it sound even grander. While painting David as an absolute genius who boldly defended his claims, Catherine felt he was crossing the line and sharply told Fatty to stop making things up. But Angela chimed in, saying she actually thought the senior's explanation made perfect sense. This completely stunned Catherine. Angela added that over the years many Earth and Moon ships had indeed crashed. Still, it was highly unexpected. To find David studying such specialized tactical drills, it was clear praise, but the guy stuffing a bun in his mouth silently thought their junior was a fantastic actress. He wondered why she could not have warned him beforehand if she wanted to put on a show, and why choose a packed cafeteria at lunchtime instead of a quieter spot. But aloud, David kept his answer simple. He told her his knowledge was pretty basic, since he had not studied any of it deeply. Suddenly, he asked if they thought aliens were behind the crashes, but nobody replied. Catherine and Angela were already busy discussing a recording of a highly skilled pilot clearing the Mars battlefield simulation. Fatty got super excited about it. Knowing Angela had massive connections, he hoped she might already know who this mystery expert was. Magnus added that whoever this player was, he was an absolute madman for pushing himself so brutally. Right at that exact second, David sneezed. They say you sneeze when someone is talking about you behind your back. Even if it is just an old rumor, David apologized and told them to carry on while Magnus and Angela both offered him tissues. Angela then mentioned she had met pilots from Earth's top 20, but this person's style matched none of them. Fatty then wondered if this mystery player had spent 10 years training solely on this single test. Angela admitted she had no idea, because details were extremely limited, but regardless of his identity, he deserved immense praise. She quietly added that a pilot's true capabilities, however, will only be shown in real combat, where things are a completely different matter. Right then, David felt Magnus stomp hard on his foot to grab his attention. Magnus was highly annoyed that David was eating so carelessly with a gorgeous girl right there. He quietly nagged his friend, but David merely shrugged and offered a calm smile. He already knew his real dynamic with Angela, who was currently turning to Catherine. Angela asked if they could train together later that afternoon, and Catherine happily agreed. Then Angela turned and asked why David and Magnus did not join them too. David instantly wanted to say no, since he already had other things lined up. He needed to gather scores, and with time running tight, training was off the table. But right before he could speak up and decline, Magnus cut in. His chubby friend accepted the invitation for both of them without hesitation. They set the meetup for 2 p.m. at the training ground, and the girls departed. Magnus quickly nudged David, insisting this joint session would be a massive experience booster. He pointed out that they definitely had free time to spare after eating lunch. Magnus truly could not comprehend why David was actively fighting the idea. But David held firm, repeating that his afternoon was already packed with his own tasks. He told Magnus to go solo, reminding him that he never agreed to anything. Seeing David's deadpan face, Magnus realized his buddy was actually dead serious about skipping. He tried one final plea, begging his friend to just put his business on hold. But David stood like a rock, repeating that he had to focus on training. His stubborn refusal was starting to get on Magnus's last nerve. The chubby guy knew he could never show up alone, so he launched a counterattack. He threatened that if David bilayed, he would wear his roommate's underwear. David instantly shut him down, countering that he would kick him straight out. He threatened to throw him right out of his Lulu, leaving Magnus empty-handed. Seeing his tactics fail, the desperate guy resorted to his absolute dirtiest trump card. He warned David that if he dared to stay behind, things would get ugly. Magnus threatened to post a massive announcement all over the university's local network. The post would publicly declare that the two of them were madly in love. He was desperate to impress Angela, hoping to secure a girlfriend before the semester ended. But David definitely did not want that insane rumor spreading across campus. He absolutely could not let Magnus post that nonsense, so he surrendered. He gritted his teeth and agreed, making Magnus cheer an absolute victory. Magnus gloated about their tight bond, though David was still incredibly annoyed. He warned his chubby friend never to use such ridiculous blackmail on him again. Still seeing Magnus beam with joy, David could not stay mad for long. He felt genuinely lucky to have a loyal comrade by his side through school. An hour later, the duo finally arrived at their designated training grounds. Catherine and Angela were already waiting for them at the fire training sector. Catherine immediately scolded them for being late, telling them to move faster next time. She complained that keeping two pretty ladies waiting like this was incredibly bad manners. Magnus shot back, muttering that she would never find a boyfriend with that attitude. Angela quickly cut through the bickering, turning to the boys with a warm smile. She casually asked the seniors if they wanted to practice some shooting first. Magnus panicked and tried to decline, but David happily nudged his friend forward. He shoved Magnus forward, telling him to stop being shy and show off his skills. He mutters something about showing Lulu his real power, leaving the girls completely puzzled. None of them recognize that name until David steps in with a very quick explanation. He says it is just some weird mental trick to help his friend shoot. Magnus steps up to the heavy battle weapon, taking aim at the distant targets. Despite the extreme distance, he manages to score a solid 92 points. It is an impressive result, earning him some genuine praise from the girls. David casually points out that Magnus was still dealing with some serious performance nerves. Without all that pressure, the big guy easily would have scored 100. Catherine winks at the boys, announcing it is time for her and Angela to show off. They take their spots quickly, lining up their shots with absolute precision. Both girls open fire immediately, and David internally admits that their performance is absolutely top tier. Angela lands a near-perfect 98, while Catherine scores a cool 95. Catherine smugly tells David it is his turn to show them what he can do. He just shrugs, preferring close combat. She insists that even frontline close combat fighters need to know how to handle a firearm. Some surrounding students watch this exchange with clear mockery in their eyes. David simply nods, promising to work harder. However, a nearby senior scoffed, calling him an absolute bore before turning away. The arrogant senior just scoffs disdainfully, calling David completely pathetic before turning to leave. That is when Catherine snaps, loudly asking if they think David is not a man. She glares at the guy who insulted him, asking if he is looking for trouble. His disrespectful tone is clearly pushing her buttons, and she tells him to back off. She demands he address her as a senior instead of acting so casual. The senior quickly tries to diffuse her anger, claiming he meant no offense. He murmurs to his buddy William that he would have never come if he knew she was here. William scoffed back, calling his friend completely weak for letting a woman defend him. He sneers that any guy who relies entirely on a girl to fight his battles is pathetic. That obviously goes for David too, since he is clearly too afraid to shoot. He knows David is just a temporary shield, but he wishes Angela chose someone much stronger. With those ugly thoughts in mind, he confidently steps forward to make his move. He smoothly suggests to Angela that they should spend the afternoon practicing together. William boldly adds that he is the only one here truly qualified to guide her. Angela immediately frowns, and David realizes how exhausting this guy really is. He has no time for these childish ego games and honestly regrets even showing up. Besides, touching a military weapon right now is a bad idea anyway. Meanwhile, William continues his petty insults, telling the big guy he desperately needs to lose weight. He sneers that with a body like that, he would only be a cook. David can see how deeply this hurts his friend, and he has finally had enough. He directly confronts William, telling him he is only speaking for his own benefit. David reminds the arrogant kid that even he is not skilled enough to challenge Angela. She is their star, so back off. William is stunned, asking if David genuinely thinks he is not good enough. He demands a showdown, while Catherine quietly wonders when David became so insanely confident. A crowd gathers, smelling a massive fight. Everyone crowds in, eagerly waiting to see what happens next. Ignoring William, David silently walked over to the shooting area to prepare. He put on his protective gear and drew his gun, aiming to avoid embarrassment. He hit the button, instantly triggering the targets. Instantly settling into a shooter stance, he braced for the challenge. Now look at this, 100 targets suddenly materialized across the field. Justin, William's friend, noticed that the guy had chosen the double bullet challenge. Both Angela and Catherine gasped, recognizing it as the most brutal test. Right on cue, all the targets began moving rapidly in wild, completely unpredictable directions. It was insanely difficult, leaving his friend Magnus deeply worried. Behind them, the other students began shouting, demanding to know why he was frozen. But David was not frozen at all, he was simply hyper-focused. He tracked every single trajectory, then, in a flash, he opened fire. His very first shot split a target right down the middle. He kept firing, though close range was his specialty. But army training demanded total mastery, and David had perfected his marksmanship. Moving targets collapsed one after another under his relentless onslaught. The watching crowd was completely stunned by his incredible technique. Soon he finished and put the gun down, trying to catch his breath. His pistol was literally smoking from the sheer speed of his run. Honestly, the score that popped up next shocked every single person in the room. No one expected an underclassman to pull off such a ridiculous score. David figured this spectacular result would finally force William to respect him. Everyone without exception stood in disbelief at his perfect passing grade. He had cleared the absolute hardest course on the range, landing every single shot directly into the top 10. It was an absolutely legendary performance from the young soldier. Smiling quietly, David turned to William and claimed he was still untrained. He casually mentioned learning this kind of point, shooting from Master Lulu Fatty. William and Justin could only exchange highly awkward, utterly confused glances at his words. They had never heard of such a master, but his results spoke for themselves. William had no choice but to offer some genuine praise to the kid. He admitted it was a good shot, then told Angela he had to go. He promised to get back in touch with her later before making his exit. Surrounding students immediately cheered, celebrating David's incredible win. David politely thanked William, saying he would always remember his kind words. He wished him well, leaving his friend Fatty looking on with absolute adoration. He had no idea his quiet buddy was hiding such insane skills. Angela could not hide her excitement either, feeling incredibly proud of his stellar performance. Once their joint training wrapped up, they said goodbye and headed home. As David walked back to his dorm, a heavy hand grabbed him. Fatty rushed up to him, declaring they were officially sworn brothers now. Clinging to his jacket, he swore to follow his lead from now on. Amused, David asked what they were to each other before this moment. Fatty laughed, admitting David had just been an older brother figure to him. He begged him not to think he was stupid, pleading for tactics lessons. He desperately wanted to shoot just as cool as him, but David was hesitant. If even Fatty was considered dumb, then very few smart people actually existed on this earth. Besides, this entire offset shooting technique was actually invented by Magnus himself. He would eventually become the ultimate king of guns, but right now, he was just ordinary. He was just a happy, lazy homebody with no grand plans for his future. Meanwhile, over in the girls' dormitory at the Dragon Riding Academy, Angela sat lost in deep thought, reflecting on David's recent quiet behavior. He used to seem completely unserious, but lately he behaved in such a quiet, reserved way. His sister always complained he lacked smarts, but today proved her completely wrong. His shooting was incredible, but how did he change so fast? If William hadn't insulted Magnus, David likely wouldn't have stepped in at all. Basically, she realized he wanted to protect her, not mock her. He wanted to help. That confession of his, was it even from the same guy? She smiled warmly, remembering his sweet words. Was he really the same person? She wondered if this was even the same guy. Honestly, who could blame her for being confused? Catherine noticed too. Lying in her own room, she was also thinking of David. She wondered if David was actually this strong already, since he always seemed so carefree. Perhaps she had completely misjudged him. He actually could keep Angela safe. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in the quiet room with a brand new message notification. Catherine opened up the chat to see what was going on. David was asking for a day off, claiming his stomach was killing him. She knew it was an obvious excuse, but since he insisted, she agreed anyway. His final words actually made her happy. He wrote that she was always reliable. But in reality, David and Fatty had a completely different plan in mind. David quickly sent a signal confirming that his excuse had successfully worked. But painful memories of the Battle of Sun Lake suddenly filled his mind. In that past life, Catherine was commanding the support battleship for the ground troops. But the battle was already lost. Headquarters ordered the entire fleet to retreat. While he and Fatty survived the escape, Catherine tragically died protecting them. It was his fault. His past laziness and stubbornness had caused her death. If only he had been stronger back then, none of this would have happened. Suddenly, a sharp, incredibly intense pain shot directly through his chest. David clutched his chest, gasping in agony without knowing what was wrong. He stood there gasping, holding his chest. What on earth was happening to his body? He slowly unzipped his sweatshirt, completely unprepared for what he would see. Right where the pain had struck lay a fresh, highly unusual scar on his skin. He had absolutely no idea where it came from or when it appeared. It was incredibly bizarre. It looked like a tattoo, but felt like soft metal. This was definitely not an illusion, but something solid and completely inexplicable. Still, plenty of unexplainable things had been happening to him lately anyway. Fortunately, his body did not have any severe adverse reaction to the mark. Otherwise, he would have been in real trouble. This entire event unfolded in the restroom. Magnus must have heard his sudden scream because he called out in concern. He even offered to call an ambulance, but David quickly shut down the idea. He quickly zipped his sweatshirt back up, knowing he had to hide this. He absolutely could not let Magnus find out about this strange metallic scar. David steps out of the restroom and asks if his friend is actually serious about learning to shoot. Magnus nods eagerly, looking up at David with hope shining in his eyes. David nods back. The very next day, they head straight to the athletic field. David immediately puts Magnus to work, forcing his tired friend to run laps. The poor guy is completely spent after an hour of running, while David just watches. Magnus regrets everything, wheezing about pretty space girls. David snaps at the disrespect, adding 10 more laps. Fatty sucks it up, knowing this suffering will unlock his genetic power. This is not in vain, he tells himself. It is all for awakening his dormant strength. David knows that building Magnus up now is the only way to keep him safe later. He is back in the past, determined to find a way to stop the upcoming catastrophe. He plans for the next 3 hours, until Fatty suddenly collapses onto the track. Fatty drops onto the dirt, wheezing that he absolutely cannot take it anymore. This is just the start, David warns, and the intensity is only going to climb. He tells Magnus to rest while he knocks out 30 laps himself before they resume. Fatty stares in horror, convinced his friend has completely lost his mind. Honestly, this brutal training routine looks like a fate worse than death. Other students gather nearby, whispering as they watch the duo drag massive tires around. This grueling routine goes on day after day for nearly an entire week. Amazingly, Fatty begins to keep pace with David, refusing to be left behind. He mutters that if he cannot survive this, he does not deserve to be David's brother. David grins, praising his friend and urging him to keep going. Just 10 more laps, David promises, and then they're going to feast on meat. Exhausted but starving, they drag themselves to the college cafeteria to load up on protein. When the server asks for their order, both guys lock eyes and speak in unison. Meat, they gasp in unison, slamming their meal cards onto the counter, demanding every single meat chop available on the buffet right then and there. They pile their trays high with meat, leaving the other students with only vegetables. Magnus grins, realizing training with his best friend is actually pretty great. But while Magnus rests, David spends every free second practicing and scanning the news. He is so focused that he even ignores calls from girls wanting to hang out. David reviews everything he knows about the human and alien factions. First, the aliens and moon people are not even related. Second, the strange alien attacks seem to follow a very specific foresight. This means the invaders might possess some form of advanced future sight. If so, even more advanced alien forces exist in the dark. Under these conditions, he must climb high into military leadership. Only then will his warnings carry the heavy weight needed to prepare them. After all, humanity originally fell simply because they were completely unprepared and weak. Those distant screams echoing from the base mean the rebel forces have finally arrived. But what if the aliens and the lunar faction are actually working together? If that is true, then Earth is facing an incredibly serious threat. Lunar technology vastly eclipses ours, running 90% of all space expeditions. The Moon only lost 40% of its forces in that 3-year war. A small fraction compared to Earth, which was utterly devastated, losing 90% of everyone. Either way, the Moon definitely has secret ways of communicating with the outside. But they hide it. They tell citizens it is completely impossible. Without Luna's air support, Earth's army faces absolute swift annihilation. So David must bypass Earth's leaders to access the Moon's data. Highly complicated, this takes way too much extra effort, especially since every single theory has its own major flaws. One is way too simple, the other is full of paradoxes. Regardless of the truth down there, David needs more information. He sighs heavily, muttering to himself that he really needs to blow off steam. Fatty overhears this and immediately offers to lend him some rather questionable discs. David instantly pounces on him, demanding to know what trash is inside his head. No time for that, they still have another brutal workout waiting. Once they finish that, David heads to the main building, leaving his exhausted friend behind. He knows his rank score is only 458, meaning his training is far from over. Even though he scored an epic rank last time, he is unsatisfied. Logging in, David notices the student chat room is incredibly lively tonight. The legendary Angela is currently ranked 5th in the entire Federation. Right now, she is locked in a high-stakes battle simulation. A city-themed virtual battlefield, the perfect setting for an intense duel. Her opponent is Andrew, a Pacific School student ranked 9th on Earth. Both elite fighters prepare themselves for the brutal match ahead. Angela focuses entirely on defense, her moves streamed live on the screens. David heads over to watch, realizing this is a high-speed urban shootout. Angela is lethal with her sniper rifle, holding down critical sightlines. Her silent, elegant movement strikes absolute terror into her opponents. But Andrew is a total beast with dual Thunder Eagle pistols. They lack precision, but their raw, explosive, destructive power is insane. Despite Angela holding the higher rank, this guy is dangerous. At this level, victory relies on reading your opponent perfectly. One single slip-up means instant defeat. Keep your eyes on this. This is a clash between two legends, both with over 2,000 points. The match ends the very moment someone exposes even a tiny flaw. Andrew is playing dead serious, having no plans of walking away defeated. He unleashes constant, relentless pressure, attacking from every angle imaginable. But the elite sniper deftly dodges and blocks every single incoming bullet. Sliding past the gunfire, she waits for her chance to strike back. Suddenly, one of Andrew's shots clips her, shattering a piece of armor. She gasps in surprise. Her near-perfect defense is usually completely unbreakable. Andrew is a complete master, keeping up the heat with homing projectiles. She barely dives behind a solid wall to escape the explosive barrage. Trapped, if this keeps up, she is finished. What now? Fortunately, the thunderous gunfire suddenly cuts out, a brief moment of silence. Andrew has run completely out of ammunition and must reload immediately. It takes him under 5 seconds, but here, that is a lifetime. This is her moment. Angela readies her weapon to take him down. She realized she had to use it. Angela dropped low, adopting a perfect sniper stance. Angela pulled the trigger. Andrew barely registered the bullet flying straight toward his neck. He threw himself backward just in time, a fraction of a second slower, and it would have been over. Andrew knew he could not underestimate her. That was expected from the fifth-ranked fighter. But he had managed to close the distance, which meant the momentum was completely on his side now. He broke cover and charged, heading straight for the wall where she was hiding. Angela had already predicted his desperate maneuver, repositioning herself to strike the moment he arrived. She repositioned quickly, mockingly asking him where he was going in such a rush. Opening fire the moment he appeared, she put Andrew's legendary combat reflexes to a severe test. He evaded every single bullet and even managed to find a window to return fire. This forced Angela to scramble backward, making it incredibly difficult to line up a clean shot. She knew allowing him to get close would mean certain defeat. Angela fired another desperate round at the approaching threat, but Andrew saw it coming a mile away. He twirled his pistols, and suddenly, a massive explosion tore through the battlefield. Blinding smoke filled the air, but Angela immediately prepared herself for a sneak attack from the flank. She got ready to defend, but the heavy smoke made it impossible to see. With her vision completely blocked, she could not react to his incoming strike in time. Andrew delivered a brutal kick to her stomach, drawing a sharp blade in one swift motion. He slashed at her as she struggled to recover, pressing his advantage harder. The relentless pressure was overwhelming, and up in the stands, the watching students erupted. They screamed for Angela to hold her ground and keep fighting, refusing to lose hope. Honestly, as frustrating as it is to watch, it looks like Angela is completely out of options. Her sword skills were undeniably great, but she was outmatched by Andrew's mastery over close combat. The guy usually avoided weapons, but he was actually deadly with almost anything. Andrew was a monster of versatility, highly proficient in almost every weapon known to their world. At this high level, choosing the right battlefield dictated who won or lost. This entire test was a brutal crucible, designed to teach them lessons they could never learn in safety. After all, failure in a safe training room is better than dying in real war. Angela suffered a predictable defeat, but David had already left the building to find his next goal. His mind shifted to Magnus. He still needed to train his friend in marksmanship. With a clear plan taking shape, David immediately booted up the high-tech simulation test system. He selected the vertigo level and stepped into the high-tech preparation pod. As the system equipped him with gear, he resolved to record the entire trial for his friend. He wanted to make sure Fatty stayed one step ahead of the competition. Meanwhile, over in the busy journalism dormitory, a massive, quiet operation was beginning to unfold. Michael dismissed Group 12, letting his exhausted classmates finally get some rest. Their task was daunting, keeping their eyes glued to every surveillance camera across the testing areas. Michael was certain that the mysterious target would eventually show his face again. The mysterious runner had to show his face soon, or risk letting his hard-earned identity slip away. To catch him in the act, Michael organized a strict shift rotation. They ignored the crowded public zones, focusing all their lenses on the most brutal, high-ranking trials. The moment someone entered a high-level test, the cameras would roll. This stakeout went by a rather fitting code name, Demon Hunt. But finding one demon among hundreds of challengers was tough. Most of the feed just showed overconfident challengers, failing miserably on screen. He had been at it for days with zero results. Meanwhile, Michael wondered if this guy was taking low-level tests on purpose. After all, for a monster like him, any difficulty is just boring. That thought made complete sense, so Michael decided to test his theory. He checked the list of non-scoring trials and found the vertigo test. Usually only freshmen tried it, but this anonymous student was different. Michael knew he had to investigate, so he pulled up the active footage. The moment he saw the guy taking the test, his jaw dropped. He was absolutely thrilled because it was the exact same expert. Even with so many students looking similar, he was absolutely certain. He was also surprised to see the guy holding paired Euroxis pistols. Everyone knew they were pretty bad weapons, but maybe he wanted a challenge. It seemed the expert was intentionally making things harder for himself. Plus, he had compacted the barrels, which Michael had never seen before. It was completely wild. Meanwhile, David was busy thinking about his weapon setup. He felt the standard setup of the Jarrow was just way too loose. so he compressed it tight to deal continuous, non-stop damage. This meant the recoil would skyrocket, but he welcomed the challenge. It was the perfect chance to test his recent hard training. Watching this, Michael realized with horror that a normal person could never survive this. The kickback would be way too brutal. This adjustment method was incredibly unusual. Yet somehow the guy was fully prepared to handle the raw power. Michael shuddered to think what insane training was required to reach this level. He quickly contacted teacher Saipan to get something big started. He wanted to set up a live broadcast for the entire school immediately. The teacher asked if he actually had anything worth showing off first. Michael confidently replied that his gut feelings were never wrong about these things. This footage was guaranteed to blow everyone away. Saipan agreed, but warned that if it was boring, Michael would get a rank 3. Just like that, every screen across the campus suddenly flickered to life. They broadcasted David live, but the student body was not happy. Complaints filled the halls, who streams a basic vertigo test. Some walked away, expecting a clash of top-tier stars instead of this. All they saw was some unknown guy tinkering with weapon settings on screen. They dismissed him as a total showman. Meanwhile, Catherine and Angela watched intently. They immediately realized his tuning method was actually brilliant. Still, teacher Saipan awkwardly wondered if Michael was playing a prank. Why stream a standard vertigo test? Meanwhile, David focused entirely on his goals. He was doing this for a friend, so failure was not an option. Keeping that deep resolve in his heart, he prepared to take the trial. During the vertigo test, fast targets flew directly at him from all sides. It looked pretty straightforward, just shoot them down and survive. But David had completely different plans the moment he fired. A massive recoil hit, but he held on with sheer grip strength. Targets exploded one by one, lighting up the screen in spectacular fashion. To most students, this is just boring basic stuff. They prefer watching movies back in the dorm. But Angela sees things differently, knowing their dismissive attitude is incredibly superficial and blind. Watch closely, real skill is hidden inside each movement. There was so much to learn from him, especially since he never missed a single shot. So why choose a simple test? Honestly, it makes no sense. He is breezing through it effortlessly. Meanwhile, David has absolutely no idea anyone is watching. He is completely focused on mimicking the moves of the future Magnus. That legendary sniper eventually becomes his ultimate, unrivaled combat partner. Getting a head start on practicing those elite skills early just makes perfect sense to him. For Michael, however, the harsh reality sets in. This is indeed a standard test. He desperately wants a top-tier A+ grade for this semester. Instead, it looks like he is stuck with a mediocre grade of 3. Meanwhile, David keeps firing. He keeps blasting target after target, executing multiple complex tactical gun stances completely effortlessly. His personal style is slightly different from Magnus's flow, requiring adaptation. To challenge himself, he backs up to push his shooting range even further. His next shot triggers a massive explosion, which he narrowly dodges with perfect timing. Angela turns to Catherine standing right beside her, asking if she also notices this bizarre situation. Catherine nods in agreement, completely understanding the bizarre nature of his run. This vertigo test is on an entirely different level compared to what they experienced. Before long, other students will realize it too, but David only cares about advancing forward. To pass this brutal trial, every single target must be destroyed. But the game decides to spawn hostile robot snipers directly into the arena. They keep firing live rounds at David, forcing him to dodge frantically while staying on target. This extra threat makes the trial infinitely harder than the basic standard version. Dual-wielding pistols means managing insane, bone-shattering recoil from both hands at the same time. It is a brutal task, but David's physical training is top-notch. He steadies his grip and unleashes 2 incredibly precise counterattacks. He instantly takes down 2 robots with clean headshots, racking up serious bonus points. Watching him, Angela realizes he is already a top-tier, first-class marksman. He can easily reach 1,500 points with that level of skill. His fluid dodging while firing 2 weapons simultaneously absolutely proves her sharp observation correct. Let us remember this vertigo test is really just a small, simple warm-up. Soon, even the other students begin noticing the strange anomalies. Live enemy shooters have absolutely no business being in a basic training test like this. David spots the hidden, camouflaged snipers himself, but chooses to wait. He cannot afford to waste precious seconds hunting down every single one of them individually. Instead, he decides to bait them out, pausing and leaving himself completely vulnerable. Right on cue, they fire, letting David pinpoint their hidden combat positions almost instantly on the field. He immediately locks onto his targets, bypassing their high-tech active camouflage. He whips around, immediately firing both pistols simultaneously. His bullets fly straight toward the exact spots where those enemy muzzle flashes had originated. He stays laser-focused, knowing one slip-up here means instant defeat. Luckily for him, these basic robots lack the speed to react. They have no time to retreat before his accurate counterattacks blast them to pieces in an instant. Several clean headshots trigger massive bonus points as he clears the area. With the area clear, David sprinted toward the finish line, scanning for new targets. Michael realized things were finally starting to get interesting. His accuracy was pretty solid, but that alone would not keep him around. His instructor agreed, while Angela stood on the sidelines, completely stunned. She could not believe he maintained such a terrifyingly high hit rate, especially since he had to constantly adjust to his own chaotic pace. But David was already eyeing his next threat, an alpha laser rifle. 4 shooters held the heavy weapon, standing right next to a hostage dummy. This was a massive problem, since the hostage could not be harmed. A single accidental scratch meant instant failure. Aguila figured she could manage it. She might pull off the shot, but it would completely kill her momentum. Catherine agreed, stopping for even a split second. There was suicidal. But check this out, David was about to pull off something legendary. Instead of slowing down to line up his shots, he kept sprinting. Dodging the incoming energy blasts, he effortlessly gunned down all 4 shooters. He kept the hostage completely safe, bagging himself some juicy bonus points. The students watching him could only marvel at how insanely accurate he was. Angela pointed out the 67-meter dash waiting right ahead. Most people would take a quick breather here, but not this guy. He refused to drop his speed, already gearing up for the next fight. While she watched in shock, brand new targets suddenly popped up before him. Without a second thought, he opened fire and immediately wiped them all out. Massive explosions erupted, but a new wave of enemies retaliated instantly. David quickly scrambled to dodge the incoming barrage, moving with intent. Every single step was perfectly calculated, leaving the enemy shots hitting thin air. He sprinted forward until he hit a massive cliff and leaped right off. A clever strategy was forming. He would bait the enemies into the ravine. Once they fell for it, he would eliminate them all at close range. The plan seemed foolproof, and he was confident he could execute it easily. Things were going smoothly as he rushed deeper into the rocky gorge. But brace yourselves, because things were about to take a massive turn. Meanwhile, Angela and Catherine could only watch, completely amazed by his skill. Suddenly, a terrifyingly massive obstacle blocked David's path, an 8-barrel gun. The PU Raptor large-caliber machine gun stood before him. This weapon possessed the single highest firepower in the Earth Federation. Several gunners stood guard around it and immediately opened fire on him. Then the giant machine gun roared to life, unleashing heavy fire in 4 directions. Dodging this hellish onslaught was almost impossible, leaving the spectators in shock. They knew this was no joke. There was simply no way around it. No ordinary human could survive this intense wall of lead on their own. Even an entire squad would get vaporized here, but David just smiled. He was honestly getting tired of shooting at static training targets anyway. Still, dodging this heavy laser fire head-on was completely suicidal. He desperately needed a real tactical strategy, and he needed it right now. His first move was finding a secure spot to map things out. David bursts from cover, sprinting toward the closest rocks. He fires on the move, dropping 2 flying gunners before damaging the weapon itself. David slides into the ravine, safety not even close here. He has to move right now because danger is closing in. A heavy machine gun barrel points straight at his head, ready to fire. The turret unleashes a devastating blast, but David is ready. He dodges the strike. Avoiding all damage, David bounces off a massive boulder to test a theory. He wants to see if this model has a specific weak zone. Specifically 3 meters off the ground. Amazingly, even a high-tech weapon has one. This blind spot gives him a perfect angle to aim much better. He retaliates instantly, blasting both the massive defensive structure and The hostile marksman stationed right beside it. The pressure is intense, but he keeps pulling the trigger, knowing this brutal trial is almost over. Suddenly, a few more enemies warp in, but he detonates them instantly. David can see the gunman count is low, but the challenge gets tougher. Now comes the real trick. Those incoming targets are dropping rapidly from the sky. If even one touches the dirt, it is over. Angela and the other spectators hold their breath. Right now, the entire class is convinced he is done for as objects plummet toward the ground. No normal student could possibly break through this wall of incoming fire. But watch this, David is about to defy every single expectation. The monitors light up with brilliant bursts of fire, proving he hit them. Then they spot him. He has taken a sniper position directly beneath the active firing line of the main turret. He found the blind spot and claimed it in the nick of time. Now it is time to end this. Preparing himself, he lunges forward, charging straight at the roaring machine gun. He pulls the trigger just once, but this is no ordinary bullet. The laser round curves cleanly around the incoming stream of fire, bending sharply toward the machine's primary power core. The final gunner is stationed right there, desperately working the control panel, completely blind to the threat. David's curving strike decapitates him instantly, rendering the weapon completely useless. Inside the command center, the spectators are left absolutely speechless. Catherine and Angela quickly realize just how dangerous this expert truly is. Controlling a bullet's trajectory midair is an incredibly rare, godlike skill. Meanwhile, David leaps onto the chassis of the smoking, broken turret. But the trial is not over yet. The final phase is starting. A massive wall of targets begins spawning in rapid succession directly ahead of him. Watching this, Michael notices a familiar, intense aura radiating from David once again. The same intense energy radiating from the mysterious challenger as before. Michael is cheering for him, hoping the online audience feels the pressure so the stream is a hit. Meanwhile, at the North American school, Harry Parker is tracking the trial, highly interested to observe how David reacts, believing the challenger is already mentally broken. Neither a human nor a machine should be able to clear this wave right after a brutal gun fight, but David operates on a different level. David focuses his mind as always, gripping his Xeroxes tightly before making his move. He opens fire on the targets from afar, though it looks almost useless. But there is a brilliant reason he chose this machine gun nest. From this single spot, he has a clear line of sight everywhere. He picks off every target cleanly, not letting a single one escape. The crowd cheers wildly, counting aloud with every single hit he makes. Only 8 targets remain, and both Catherine and Angela join the count. Shouts ring out that only 3 are left, but David downs them all. Massive chain explosions burst across the sky, completely blinding the battlefield. The sheer scale of the blast surprises even him, but he succeeds. As the final target drops to the earth, the trial officially ends. Stunned silence grips the main school building, leaving everyone frozen in disbelief. Then the entire hall erupts into roaring cheers, celebrating his incredible victory. Watching the persistent fires in the sky, David fires one final shot. That last blow settles the score, and now he can head back. He walks toward the finish line, ready to check his official grade. Honestly, he is just relieved to pass this ordeal for his friend. He heads for the gate that will take him back to the starting room. That is where he began, but now, the students freeze in complete shock. Seriously, his final score is absolutely mind-blowing, leaving them in disbelief. David took only 1 minute and 58 seconds to complete it. Word spreads that he conquered the hidden epic level of Vertigo. With difficulty over 120%, his rank is unreal. He got an epic grade with 2 pluses, completely crushing the competition. Seeing such absolute dominance, nobody wants to pick a fight with him. Angela realizes this is no fluke. The trial was incredibly lethal. It was far worse than it looked, and Catherine completely agrees. She could follow him initially, but that final stage went beyond her limits. It was out of her league, but Harry Parker just bursts out laughing. He cackles over this newly revealed monster, while David calmly critiques his own run. He knew he could have gone faster, but there was no need. The trial pace was strictly fixed anyway, so optimizations changed nothing. It did not matter to an expert, even with a 10-point cap. His own performance lands around 7 or 8, but he is bored. This whole shooting test was just far too dull for him. In his past life fighting the outsiders, he faced deadlier threats. Those poison flies would drill holes into humans upon the slightest contact. When swarming in massive waves, only a heavy flamethrower could stop them. But by the third year of the war, they evolved completely. They became immune to fire, proving how terrifying their adaptation truly is. Such alien evolution was absurd, but David clears his mind for now. There is no use dwelling on old memories when he must rewrite history. To change things, he must hunt down and destroy their source completely. Cutting off the outsiders is key, otherwise the war will start again. No matter how hard humanity struggles, the exact same tragedy will occur. Even if humanity wins these two massive battles, the casualties will be devastating. David refused to let that happen, and he suddenly received 300 bonus points. A little effort for some sweet extra points, talk about an absolute win. It was the perfect motivation to keep pushing, until his stomach suddenly started growling. Realizing he needed food right away, he immediately sprinted off toward the mess hall. Dinner was not something he could delay, especially since he deserved a massive feast. Meanwhile, a high-stakes meeting was underway at the prestigious cavalry school. The headmaster carefully reviewed the list of elite students chosen to represent them. He felt incredibly confident about the lineup he assembled for the upcoming battles. His mind was already on the next contest when someone suddenly burst inside. A panicked staff member rushed into the office, completely derailing the crucial strategy session. The other professors scoffed at this unbelievably rude interruption. But the rector was just surprised, remembering the kid had promised to see this himself. Standing up immediately, he informed the room that he would have to step out for a bit. He told them to consider their little strategy meeting officially over for the afternoon. Hurrying out the door with the staffer, he was handed a tablet showing David's broadcast. Seeing the footage of David's performance left the rector completely speechless. Meanwhile, in a high-tech European strategic lab, Dr. Calisadin received an unexpected visitor. The old doctor bluntly warned his guest that this better be worth his precious time. Quickly explaining, the visitor mentioned it was about the doctor's recent arc-firing research. It turned out someone had actually successfully pulled off the highly theoretical technique. While the shooter's identity remained a mystery, they were pulling every favor to find him. A mysterious student had pulled off the impossible shot during a vertigo test. As for David himself, he was currently chilling back in his dorm room. He was sitting with Magnus, who was completely losing his mind over David's skills. The chubby kid was busy imagining, pulling off the exact same move to impress Lulu. It was a pretty bizarre daydream, prompting David to ask if he finished today's training. The big guy happily confirmed that he had met all the requirements. He insisted it was easy and grumbled that David simply lacked any refined taste. But David was actually deep in thought about his friend's surprising hidden talent. Magnus was genuinely talented because that training program was anything but easy. It proved the guy was just a massive slacker with incredible untapped potential inside. David realized it was time to drop the nice guy act entirely. The very next morning, he dragged his sleeping friend out of bed at dawn. They started by dragging massive tires around the stadium track again. Only this time, David stacked twice as many tires and drastically increased the speed. He showed absolutely no mercy during the weightlifting sessions either, piling on the heavy plates. It was pure torture for Magnus, but he pushed through and somehow finished every rep. After completing another brutal 100 laps, they finally headed to the cafeteria. Well, only David actually ran there. The chubby slacker was barely alive. He didn't even have the strength to crawl, let alone walk to breakfast. Once inside, the two of them ended up eating enough food to feed 4 people. The surrounding students watched in absolute shock as the pair inhaled their meals. Seeing Magnus adapt so quickly, David realized it was time to double the intensity. Magnus could only sigh, asking if they were really going to keep acting like fools. They were actually going to compete. David agreed, admitting things had gotten tougher. But life was more fun. Magnus did not share that excitement, though. Just then, Catherine approached them and teased Magnus for being far too lazy. But she quickly added that it was fixable, promising to keep an eye on him. Magnus immediately folded his hands in prayer, begging her to stop. He called her a truly saintly soul, but insisted that she should not do it. Then his eyes drifted down to Catherine's plate, leaving him quite surprised. He asked if she was dieting, but Catherine explained she had just ramped up. Her training even reaching 1,700 points, which absolutely horrified him. David just smirked because he and his heavy friend had been working out, too. The ranking scores had clear tiers, starting with the first level at 500, the second tier at 800, and the third hitting 1600 points. Beyond that lay the elite expert zone at 2000 plus, where their leader aimed. David mentioned that he and Fatty already had nearly 800 points each. And they were definitely participating, only Magnus hated the entire plan. So Catherine offered him a rare Lulu figurine to entice him, hearing that. It was a limited edition collectible of his favorite idol. Fatty immediately agreed. But he quickly came to his senses, accusing her of bluffing because there was no way she had such a rare item. The girl simply smiled, showing him the certificate for the figurine on her phone, which was enough. He instantly rushed over, swearing that he would double his training starting today. He assured their lovely head girl that the mission would be fully accomplished, leaving David feeling pretty uneasy, and with that, the talk finally ended. They quickly finished eating, since the next class on the schedule was starting soon. A short while later, they were sitting inside the massive lecture hall. When a classmate approached David and Magnus, he wondered why they chose the back. Catherine assumed the two of them were up to some sort of mischief again. But Magnus just grinned, explaining that this specific lecture was actually quite interesting. Right then, Professor Wyoming, a veteran who had been teaching there for over 20 years, stepped inside the room, but he looked incredibly tense, prompting the watching students to whisper and wonder what was wrong with him. Some guessed he was planning a joke before the lesson, though he was no comedian. The professor did not look like a joker, however, as he walked straight to the blackboard, picked up the chalk, and wrote some words. The entire room watched in absolute stun as they read his message. God descended to Earth yesterday, a phrase that instantly got everyone excited. They realized that today they would be analyzing the legendary speech given by that mysterious expert. Still, many remained highly skeptical, unable to believe someone could secure an epic rank with 2 pluses. Meanwhile, the professor gestured to the board, noting that some of them had likely witnessed the event already. For those who missed it, he assured them they would review it together right now. He pressed a small button on his desk, and 6 massive display screens descended before the students to provide a much clearer view of the footage. Those who skipped yesterday's boring broadcast, they quickly realized their mistake, while the ones who had watched were eager to analyze the legendary moment again. Rewatching the walkthrough gave him goosebumps every single time. Justin felt like he was spotting something brand new in this guy's combat patterns during every single replay. After all, the fighters served as a perfect model for studying advanced battle tactics, which is exactly why the professor selected his footage for today's lecture. Pausing the video, Wyoming turned to face the class. He began talking about how this legendary fighter had previously cleared the infamous Mars battlefield. Yesterday's test had already proven that top-tier fighters reaching the epic rank could clear 120% difficulty, but today the professor wanted to look beyond basic results and simple designer tricks. Instead, this challenge put lost combat techniques on full display. Skills lost to time. Out of nowhere, Wyoming pointed at Catherine, asking for her thoughts on the matter. Caught off guard, she still stood right up, explaining that she had watched the entire event live in the main building yesterday. She had witnessed everything firsthand. She admitted this was already the 26th time she had analyzed the footage, yet some moves still made no sense. The professor nodded approvingly and then called on Justin, sitting nearby. Asking what his thoughts were on the clip, Justin admitted that he had watched the video 56 times, and seeing this expert skill was absolutely destroying his confidence. Wyoming smiled, telling the class that both students he just questioned had combat scores over 1600. In fact, their top-tier marksmanship was above the 2000 mark, sparking a massive wave of excitement in the room. Now get ready, because he was about to analyze this battle from a god's eye view, so they had better pay close attention. Picking up a piece of chalk, he wrote on the blackboard, making the students realize this next lesson was all about guns. Wyoming tossed the chalk aside and looked around with a smug, satisfied expression, waiting for anyone to ask a question. Seeing silence, he moved on to explain the core mechanics behind accurate suppressive fire assessment. This advanced technique takes place before any target's trajectory fully extends. Doing this with one target is easy enough, but tracking 10 different targets at once, each following its own unique path, is insanely difficult. the professor asked anyone who could pull this off to raise their hands. Immediately, both Catherine and Justin raised theirs up with absolute confidence. But then the professor raised the stakes, asking who could do it under heavy interference. This time, not a single other hand went up in the entire classroom. Even Catherine and Justin slowly lowered theirs. Undeterred, the professor announced. They would now analyze weapon handling, pure shooting mechanics, and high-level movement. He explained how Calisadin's combo shooting was famous for. Unbelievable arcing bullets, the technique relied on predicting exactly how long a target would fly. Within a pre-calculated distance, that was the standard theory at least. But this guy on the screen, David, had completely evolved the technique. He wielded dual Xerox guns to execute an advanced, modified version, Wyoming realized. That despite the insane complexity, there was zero hesitation in David's eyes. Next came the high-frequency movement, a true god-tier technique. For dominant ranged combat, yet the real challenge was the physical strain required to make the user's body adapt. Meanwhile, David quietly watched Magnus, reacting to the lesson, knowing his friend was deeply invested in his success. David figured that if he kept pushing just a bit harder, he would definitely wake up soon. There was no doubt about it. Finally, the professor moved on to the real highlight. This was the arc shooting technique, the very same move used by that elite expert. Sure, some fighters managed to pull it off by pure luck, but this mystery man, he did it effortlessly, like second nature. Even the professor found it hard to believe. No one could look at a perfect shot straight to the head and call it luck. He estimated that fewer than 10 people across both Earth and the Moon could pull this off. But as it turned out, that was not even the most difficult part of the run. The expert saved a final move for the end that completely stunned the veteran shooters. That unbelievable display was exactly why they started calling this guy a literal god. The professor queued up a video clip showing 100 targets at the test end. He slowed the footage down 50 times to show the expert using group shooting tactics. Honestly, the map designer never actually intended for anyone to clear this level alone. The entire stage was built to test a full squad, not a single solo player. Hearing that a solo run was supposed to be impossible left the students pretty discouraged. Seeing their long faces, Professor Wyoming quickly stepped in to reassure them. He urged them to keep their heads up, since anyone could master these skills eventually. Meanwhile, David couldn't shake a strange, familiar feeling about those targets. Blasting those aerial threats reminded him of his time on the Red Planet. Back on the battlefields of Mars, they faced swarms of flying alien beasts. The swarms' attack patterns were almost identical to the simulation they just watched. Could those bizarre extraterrestrials actually share some deep connection with humanity? Just as that wild thought crossed his mind, a sharp, searing pain stabbed his chest. This wasn't the first time, but the familiar agony returned with a vengeance. Clutching his chest, he realized this episode was far worse than the last one. Unable to take another second of it, he quietly slipped out of the lecture hall. He rushed straight into the nearest restroom, desperate to check on his old wound. Standing before the mirror, he tried to understand why this was happening again. His chest throbbed with pain as he hurriedly unzipped his top to look. Shock washed over him as he stared at a brand new scar on his skin. He wondered if these marks carried some hidden message, especially since the first appeared. Right when he believed Catherine was dead, regardless, he had bigger problems to solve. He desperately needed to secure enough points before the big tournament started. Gaining access to the elite inner circle was the only way to get real answers. Stealing his resolve, David left the restroom and walked back toward the lecture hall. Inside, he spotted Magnus nodding, along with whatever the professor was saying. Slipping back into the room, David felt the mood had completely turned around. The vibes were much lighter now, making him hope Fatty would succeed soon. That crucial moment was fast approaching. Moments later, the class finally dismissed. Students flooded toward the exit, complaining about the lecture running late as usual. Still, they admitted it was pretty fascinating. Magnus was practically buzzing with excitement. He kept wondering about the identity of that god-tier warrior they had just seen. Nearby, Catherine's classmate excused herself to run a quick errand on her own. Catherine nodded in agreement, waving goodbye as her friend walked away. Turning around, she spotted David and Magnus heading out to grab some lunch. She caught up with them and offered to grab some lunch today, saying it was her treat. The fat man awkwardly noted that Mrs. Hedman was paying them lots of attention. But when Catherine asked if there was actually something wrong with that, He quickly shook his head to deny it. Then the girl turned toward David, asking if he thought that mysterious expert shooting style was similar to his. That's when David calmly dropped a bomb, claiming he was actually that legendary expert. But naturally, his friends didn't believe a word. It just sounded too crazy, leaving David thinking that the absolute truth is often pretty hard to accept. Catherine noticed that he must be making some pretty great progress lately. She could easily tell from the leaps he and Fatty were making in training. Hearing her words, both of the guys couldn't help but feel pretty good. Magnus chimed in, saying he was the only one who hadn't trained seriously yet. Catherine looked right at him, smiling as she said she was looking forward to it. That sincere encouragement from the head girl, along with her sweet look, instantly made Magnus blush. He quickly turned his head away to hide his face. But it was totally obvious that he was loving every second of the praise. David quietly realized that in the future, Fatty would easily reach his current level. Just then, Catherine overheard rumors that the Northern Academy had already started target training. They were already running highly advanced targeted simulation battles. Soon, the conversation drifted right back to that mysterious, godlike expert. Most students were absolutely convinced that this savior must have come from Earth. Pumped up by the hype, Catherine and Magnus wanted to train immediately. After lunch, they stayed true to their word and headed straight for the gym. Meanwhile, David decided to clear his head and slipped off to the library. He needed to find some deep research on the mysteries of space and time. Records showed that in just 200 years, humanity had advanced insanely fast, completely terraforming the moon and launching massive deep space expeditions to Mars. A brilliant scientist named Dr. Saran da Vinci had spearheaded these grand missions. David realized this legendary figure was practically worshipped as a god on both worlds. His loyal followers made up the biggest faction on the moon, driving scientific civilization forward. Thanks to them, the resource-starved moon had actually surpassed Earth in technological development. In the final years of his life, this genius focused entirely on spacetime theory. His groundbreaking research allowed humanity to take a massive leap in advanced physics. In short, mankind had harbored some pretty wild hopes of finally controlling time. David figured there must be some trigger for time travel, an intermediary that activates only under highly specific, perfect cosmic circumstances. Something capable of actually slipping through time itself, like a literal human soul. But with current technology, building a stable environment for this was impossible. Still, the deep universe had already left behind a massive clue. A secret wormhole nested deep inside another wormhole, touching a world beyond 4 dimensions. These temporal coordinates were basically the most magnetic points in the stream of time. At these points, a traveling soul could easily slip into a new body without rejection. It would completely bypass any spiritual rejection, seamlessly completing the host transfer. But even if all of this theoretical logic held up perfectly on paper, there were still massive, glaring questions, like where David had actually come from. Contact with a black hole, he wondered if the sheer force of a nuclear self-destruct could trigger that. Could a nuclear blast actually warp space? Da Vinci's theory suggested something else. He believed different paths of time and space were deeply interconnected. They constantly influence each other directly. So his actions here would inevitably alter the future. David was deep in thought. He was so distracted, he did not even notice Angela walking right up to him. She asked if he was into this stuff too. He gave a pretty awkward smile. He claimed he was just browsing some random books about outer space, but she knew better. She teased that being too humble can sometimes look a lot like arrogance. She pointed out that he had been staring at those same pages for over an hour. She completely busted him. He changed the subject, asking if she believed in time travel. Angela admitted that instead of dwelling on the past, she preferred looking ahead. Then she mentioned hearing about his upcoming tournament and offered a joint training session. She suggested they practice together over the weekend to prep for the competition. David was pretty confused. Why would she suddenly extend this invitation? After all, his only role in this whole thing was to act as her shield. Angela quickly clarified that it was actually his sister who asked for this. She looked kind of embarrassed, so David quickly agreed, saying they could learn together. Besides, he had been itching to test his skills against the school's top fighter. Angela was widely known as the absolute #1 in their academy. He could finally experience the raw power of a 2,000-plus score fighter. They said goodbye. Throughout the night, he found absolutely nothing else. He knew more insane secrets were waiting down the road. But a gut feeling told him these mysterious strangers were connected to humanity. Realizing he shouldn't overthink things right now, he decided to leave the library. Dwelling on mysteries forever wouldn't help. By now, the clock showed 5 a.m. As he walked out into the chilly morning air, someone else approached the building. The stranger quickly logged in, searching for highly restricted archives. Of course, David was already gone and missed this. Soon, the weekend arrived. Magnus was absolutely thrilled that their teacher actually bought him that Lulu figurine. It was a reward for finally hitting their target of 800 points. Meanwhile, David was still planning to go practice with Angela. He invited Magnus along, but his friend refused to be a third wheel. Plus, the Lulu fan club was hosting a massive group event this Saturday. He really wanted to go and show off his brand new collectible figurine there. So David simply invited him over for dinner later, which Magnus gladly accepted. When Saturday finally arrived, David headed straight to the private club training ground. Angela was already there, throwing heavy strikes at a massive punching bag. While testing her raw physical strength, she paused to take a quick break. David quickly noticed she was already wearing her full combat uniform. She smiled, noting that he actually showed up for their session after all. She asked him to give her a minute to finish one last combo. David admitted he did not expect her to show up this early. It was barely 8 in the morning, which seemed incredibly early for a weekend. But Angela replied that staying disciplined was just a natural part of her routine. She was ready to spar with him and booted up the training system. It began projecting training models, while the girl adopted a sharp fighting stance. Preparing to test a new combination of punches, she focused her mind. Strangely enough, her eyes were closed as she prepared her opening attack. When her eyes snapped open, several model soldiers already surrounded her. But this was exactly what Angela wanted. Her new technique was designed for this. When a fighter is backed into a corner, panic usually leads to mistakes. That means you must strike first, taking initiative before the enemy can coordinate. Driven by that exact rule, Angela lunged at the nearest soldier model. Pivoting hard on one leg, she launched a heavy kick with the other. The blow struck his stomach, shattering the digital figure into pieces. Next, Angela stepped back and reclaimed his position, giving her room to break the circle. This escape pleased her, but there was no time to relax as she spotted another target. Another opponent charged her, but the exact same fate awaited this virtual soldier. This time, Angela delivered a clean, crushing kick right to his head. David, watching the training display, silently praised her as a truly outstanding student. Her genetic strength had reached impressive heights, and her micro-control was elite. Every single movement left her room to maneuver, flowing seamlessly into the next. This fluid style kept her safe while building devastating lethal power. This was the exact microcontrol skills possessed only by top-tier combat experts. Meanwhile, Angela had almost wiped out the entire group of virtual soldiers. With only 3 holographic fighters left, she prepared her final sweeping attack. She leapt high into the air, bringing her heel down to shatter the last opponent. Landing softly on her feet, the girl finally took a deep breath. High-intensity physical combat was exhausting, but she had a hidden motive today. She had intentionally arrived before David for a very specific reason. Angela flipped her hair back with casual grace, looking exceptionally beautiful in the light. She was fully counting on catching his eye, and right on cue, he started clapping. Angela looked over with a warm smile, and David praised her performance. Treating every training session like a real death match was classic school champion behavior. Hearing his high praise, the girl looked down, suddenly feeling quite shy. She admitted that he saw right through her and offered a soft laugh. She confessed she always knew David Hayden's brother was secretly highly talented. Flustered, David joked that it was probably just his raging hormones at play. But the girl shook her head, suggesting he was deliberately hiding his real skills. She warned that pretending to be weak for too long has its dangers. If you wear a mask forever, you might eventually forget your true strength. With a playful smile, Angela proposed they hold joint training sessions before the tournament. She felt confident that if he gave his absolute best in shooting, he stood a very strong chance of making it past the second round. David smiled, accepting the compliment and expressing his deep appreciation for her confidence. He then proposed an official challenge, a best-of-3 match to decide the winner. The sudden offer surprised Angela, making her look at him in disbelief. She asked if he was truly ready, warning that she never holds back in a fight. David just laughed, confidently assuring her that he could handle whatever she threw at him. His only real slip-up was that first failed confession, since he knew. She took things seriously. He suggested a tiny wager and asked if Angela agreed. In fact, she looked pretty amused, staring right back at him playfully. As she asked what he wanted, if he won, she had to come to his house for dinner tomorrow, and yeah, it would be another heavy meal. Angela wondered if that was really all, and David nodded, asking if she would finally be his girl. Skipping the direct answer, Angela bowed low and admitted that she really wanted to taste his dad's cooking again. Then she winked at David and decided to cut him a little slack by tweaking the rules a bit. She said if he managed to win just a single round, he took the whole bet. But if he lost all three, he had to keep playing her shield. After hearing her out, David gave a quick thumbs up, signaling he was totally ready to get right down to business. Trust me, this matchup is going to be absolutely wild. Soon they were standing inside the school's actual arena, wearing specialized combat equipment. Angela was so focused she completely missed one tiny detail. After all in this gear, David closely resembled that mysterious expert, only without a helmet. The girl pointed toward the weapon rack, telling him to grab whatever weapons he wanted since she really did not mind. He knew those training tools were completely unsharpened, but they could still cause plenty of real damage, so scanning the rack, he figured it was probably safer to skip using weapons entirely, since even blunt gear can get you into major trouble quite easily, especially since accidents always happen in the middle of a chaotic fight anyway. So he told Angela he was going in barehanded, which left her pretty shocked. At first, she just laughed it off, thinking he was just doing his usual weird thing, but then she suddenly got irritated. In a flash, her entire expression hardened, staring at him with a heavy glare that made him feel quite uneasy. She got ready, dropping into a stance while warning him they would see where all this arrogant confidence came from. Both of them squared up and locked into position. Now they just needed the official system countdown, which buzzed to life moments later. Instantly, Angela unleashed a powerful specialized combat move, and David was pretty shocked to realize she was channeling an actual aura. Springing off the high grip, specially coated floor of the arena, the girl launched her offensive. True to her style, she leaped straight toward him, throwing out a high kick for a very solid reason. After all, a kick's striking force is way stronger than any punch, thanks to the sheer surface area. But just as her heel almost slammed directly into David's face, he casually sidestepped and caught it. This was so sudden, Angela was totally stunned by his incredible reflexes. After all, she had rushed him incredibly fast. Yet he countered her effortlessly and pressed his bare hand right against her throat. She had barely 2 seconds to react, or the match was instantly over. She swung hard with her other fist, and while David moved to block, she executed a quick dash and managed to back right away. Angela realized that though that punch used only 70% power, his block was incredibly sudden. But then she figured since he is usually pretty slow-witted, maybe she should start pushing far more aggressively. Meanwhile, the guy just raised a single finger. He pointed out the score was already 1-0 in his favor. Instead of no reply, Angela simply reset her stance for another strike. She wanted to even things up, switching her footwork to run in a circle. David watched, completely puzzled by her circular movement. Meanwhile, Angela quietly closed the distance from behind just as he braced for an impact. She wound up a massive punch, pouring way more power into this shot. It shifted into a high kick to the head, but to her shock, David effortlessly dodged it and countered instantly. He grabbed her supporting leg and yanked her close, throwing her completely off balance onto the cold floor. Angela lay on the floor in absolute shock, unable to mask her complete disbelief. She stared up at David. He lightly stepped back, calling out that it was already 2-0. He calmly advised her to understand her own limits during training, while constantly analyzing her opponent during a real fight. She could not treat him like some simple simulation model. Real opponents do not lag. Honestly, Angela had never felt this overwhelmed before. She could not even comprehend why she was losing so badly. Strangely, at one point it felt like David had completely vanished from her sight, and when he grabbed her leg, his momentum should have forced him back slightly, letting her break free. Instead, his grip felt like it completely stole her control. Completely helpless, she had never faced anything like this before. Forcing herself to calm down, she desperately tried to steady her breathing and find her focus. Staring at him, she found the defeat incredibly hard to swallow. Yet, rules are rules, you lose, you pay. Besides, she had to admit, he was currently the superior fighter, even if she could not explain how. Deciding to call it quits because honestly, who could blame her, she admitted he was holding back. She conceded the match, but David quickly cut her off, insisting it was far from over. As Angela looked on in confusion, David raised 3 fingers. They had agreed to 3 rounds, so they absolutely had to finish the match. Win or lose, this sparring session would be incredibly valuable for both of them. He offered her a warm smile. Angela hesitated for a moment before agreeing, adding that she would be using weapons for this final round. With that, she drew 2 razor-sharp blades that did not belong to the system. These personal swords were part of her custom gear, and she knew how to use them. Angela immediately slipped into a lethal stance. Ready to strike, her eyes burned with a new, fierce determination. David felt the sudden shift in the air as Angela cleared her mind. To reach such deep focus in the middle of a battle was incredibly rare. But then again, he expected nothing less from the absolute top-ranked fighter. Angela politely asked him for guidance, nodding in approval. David prepared himself, slipping into a close combat stance he trusted completely. Even against sharp weapons, within a split second, Angela closed the gap and launched a relentless assault. Her twin blades moved with masterly precision. David silently praised her skill, dodging smoothly without letting a single blade connect yet. Still, Angela remained completely confident, deftly twirling her weapons in preparation. Angela had absolute confidence in her skills, prepping her twin blades. Her cleaving cut strikes, it is a unique technique that almost nobody can dodge. And she really wanted to try it out on David. As expected, he leaps up at the last split second, completely untouched. He actually believed she had successfully cut off every single path, yet her blades hit nothing. It was totally useless. Angela stands there wondering if her speed is somehow just not enough today. But the exact moment he lands is her ultimate chance, so she quickly pounces. Before he even touches down, she is hovering over him, ready to strike. She brings down another massive overhead swing. On the sidelines, cheering students gather close. They whisper that this next blow is bound to hit him. They know she has perfected her ultimate technique. Now, David is genuinely curious. He watches Angela suddenly alter her strike trajectory right in midair, bringing both of her blades into play at once. Talk about real skill. This is her famous 100 acrylic spiral slash, executed with great skill. David quickly realizes he needs to stay completely cool and just use his swords. He parries the first, then the next, because this girl is not stopping. She crowds his space, pushing him back. Every single swing of her weapon grazes right past his skin, yet David easily dodges every attack. Amazing. Honestly, he finds it pretty funny that she cannot land a single hit on him. Time for a counter. He waits for her left hand to attack again. Then he suddenly locks her wrist in an inescapable iron grip, cold. She cannot move either hand, caught completely off guard. Shocking. And then the unimaginable happens. He disarms her with one precise strike. Her weapon flies away. Angela stands frozen, her mind completely blank with confusion. But she recovers quickly. She still has one blade left, which is definitely more than enough if she plays it smart. She lunges at him once more. But David effortlessly blocks her arm with another bizarre, high-level maneuver, grabbing the hilt. In a flash, he pins her against the wall with the cold blade pressed hard against her throat. Game over. She is totally defeated. Angela is left shivering with fear. Why did he suddenly get so incredibly serious? He coldly tells her that in a real fight, this attack means instant death. His words leave her utterly stunned, but then he realizes the awkward truth of it. He has been holding her down way too long. A sudden wave of discomfort sweeps over him. He quickly releases her, saying it was actually a pretty decent match. Fight, he points out that the score is now sitting at 3-0. In his favor, apologizing for getting a little too intense. Meanwhile, Angela is left speechless. She practiced so hard to master an ultimate level skill. Yet this guy shut it down like it was nothing. It is unbelievable. Even if she is not in the top 10 in close combat, her level is still around 2,000 points. She just cannot wrap her mind around it. Quietly, she asks David how. He immediately feels like an idiot for fighting a girl like that, of course he had the advantage. She has no idea he is actually the commander of the Blood Wolves. So he just plays it off as pure luck, asking if she did not lose on purpose, making her blush with sudden embarrassment, but she snaps back, telling him to stop changing the subject because she is in top. She had never seen anyone stop an ultimate skill using nothing but their bare hands. He even used that first-class skill, though David claimed he had no memory of it. But Angela remembered it perfectly and was not about to let him forget. She reminded him of his own words, that using it brings nothing but absolute death. Did he seriously not know that skill could easily secure a victory in any group competition? David told her to consider how incredibly exhausting that level of focus really is. In battle, a dropping attention span means a sniper could easily pick her off. Or facing 100 opponents would leave her completely drained and defenseless. She had not considered that, but with their battle finished, they needed to clear out. A crowd of eager students was waiting outside, hoping to try their luck too. But seeing the two walk out together sparked a wave of intense jealousy. Angela suddenly grabbed Michael's arm like a doting girlfriend, asking what to wear. She wanted her outfit perfect for their dinner date the next evening. David realized she was putting on a show, and he had to play along. He was doing a solid job, acting as her protective shield. The surrounding students screamed with absolute joy, never expecting to see them together. Angela then asked what kind of gifts David's parents would actually like. She wanted to keep things formal this time, as they finally left the school ground. Every single eye followed them, desperate to catch a glimpse of her new boyfriend. David wondered if he was just a shield, or if this act might become reality. Either way, he was fine. Soon, Sunday arrived at his parents' house. They were hosting guests once more, and this time, Fatty joined the gathering. Dina was not thrilled, complaining that she never got this kind of royal treatment. Meanwhile, Magnus jokingly asked his friend what kind of love potion he used. Dina rolled her eyes, making it clear she hated being around Magnus. He fired back that with an attitude like that, she would end up single forever. David laughed and backed his friend up, teasing her like an annoying older brother. The focus soon shifted back to the main couple, David and Angela. Magnus pressed for answers, reminding everyone that she had rejected his friend before. He wanted to know how they suddenly ended up together like this. Angela blushed deeply and insisted they had it all wrong, explaining the bet. She lost a bet, that was it, but Dina suspected there was more. She teased that Angela probably lost on purpose, just to have an excuse. Magnus whispered to his friend that his sister was clearly making things complicated. But Angela quickly protested, insisting she had genuinely fought with everything she had. Despite her best efforts, she could not manage to win more than a single round. She turned to David, noting he had been at the school for 3 years already. She had even dug through the archives of the top students from the past decade. Yet his name was missing, completely gone from those legendary records. But yesterday, he effortlessly countered and picked apart 100 spiral dissections. Suddenly, his sister marched over. She pinched David's cheeks tight. She joked that his face did not feel like some kind of hidden mask. She demanded a serious answer to her next question, warning him of the stakes. Any wrong move could land him in a military court or on an autopsy table. With that blunt threat delivered, she started firing off her most intense questions. Only the real David would know. Some questions were pretty personal. But Dina was not embarrassed. Only Angela looked completely red. David warned her that she was really looking for trouble. Dina just laughed and threatened to yell for their mother instead. Even so, she was finally convinced he was just too cool. She asked Fatty if he noticed any weird behavior, but nothing. He just said David was training hard. David had finally had enough. He cut in to remind them they did not come to criticize. Turning to Fatty, he added they should really stop bickering so aggressively. Once everyone finally cooled down, Angela suddenly spoke up in agreement. She admitted his advice was right, and her 100 acrylic spiral technique was useless in a real fight. David nodded slowly. He explained that once the move starts, it is full of mistakes. With enough focus, any opponent can easily catch her hand speed. Suddenly, Dina cut him off, completely tired of his lecture. She argued he was forgetting how incredibly fast the technique actually is. She told her brother to stop showing off, or else she would tell Mom everything. This threat really annoyed David. He grabbed some apples to show them exactly what he meant. He explained that knife speed matters, but speed alone is useless. Finding the right rhythm is what actually comes first in combat. He tossed the apple high, and in the blink of an eye, he struck. He unleashed a move almost identical to her 100 spiral splits. When the fruit landed back in his palm, it was perfectly sliced. All three of his friends stared in absolute, jaw-dropping shock. David smiled, totally satisfied. Talk about an absolute legendary flex. He explained that with 100 slashes, the strike area gets too wide. That just leads to wild chopping, but battles need real technique. Sometimes slowing things down helps you reach a higher level of mastery. The group was completely stunned by his deep, expert insight. Angela estimated 58 cuts, with 13 at an angle, all perfectly fluid. Fatty counted 48 seamless cuts, with 10 shifting tempo effortlessly. It was insane. Dina stared at David with a deeply skeptical look. She openly admitted that she doubted he was her brother again. David laughed, teasing her that he was indeed her brother from the future. But his sister was not in the mood for his weird jokes. She kicked him hard in the leg, telling him to stop. Right then, their parents called them all inside for dinner. They could always finish their little martial arts debate after eating. Once seated, the parents immediately began piling Angela's plate with food. Her eyes widened at the sheer variety of delicious, steaming dishes. From savory curries to rich stewed chicken with chestnuts, the spread was amazing. Angela felt pretty shy about accepting such a massive mountain of food. Then the mother suddenly dropped the ultimate, classic embarrassing parent question. She bluntly asked what a gorgeous girl like Angela saw in her son. David felt a bit uncomfortable, wondering if he really seemed that hopeless to his own parents. He stopped the girl from answering, telling everyone they should just start eating. This way, nobody would feel awkward. The group spent the rest of dinner chatting casually. They stuck to safe topics. Once things wrapped up, David stood up to walk Angela out. Stepping outside, they found themselves alone under the night sky. David still felt pretty hesitant. Unsure where to guide her, David was surprised when Angela remarked on his family devotion. He awkwardly asked if that was not simply natural for every single person. Angela shook her head, explaining she meant something far deeper that he likely missed. He probably had not even noticed the way he looked at his parents and sister. He watched over Dina with such warmth, it felt like he would die for them. It was not the gaze of some carefree teenager, but of a deeply weathered, mature man. Someone who had survived too much. She remembered him as just a mischievous kid before. Now it almost felt like David was just putting on a series of different acts. Hearing her sharp observation, David could only chuckle rather nervously. He promised himself to be much more careful with his expressions from now on. Angela smiled softly and pointed out her nearby car, telling him he could head back. But David shook his head. Dina ordered him to walk her all the way. He certainly did not want to make his fierce little sister angry. They walked on. Reaching the vehicle, Angela thanked him again for such a wonderfully warm welcome. She asked about meeting up next week, and David gave a somewhat hesitant nod. As her car drove away, David quietly reflected on everything that had just transpired. He realized she made the right choice by drawing a very firm line. This saved her from getting caught up in his incredibly messy, dangerous life. Meanwhile, Angela could not shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with him. His smile carried an unspeakable sadness, but David was determined to stay strong. He refused to bring any more suffering to those he cared about most. Even if tragedy was completely inevitable, he would face this cruel world smiling. He would protect them all, his family, Fatty, Dina, and even Angela. Now let's look at Earth's high command, where things are getting incredibly tense. They were furiously debating the upcoming tournament, complaining about the sluggish progress. He should do something useful. Sunny was completely done waiting. Sunny slammed his fist onto the table, demanding that everyone shut up. Enough was enough, he roared. Besides, the Luna faction had solid reasons. Their goal was simple, to select and appoint humanity's absolute best fighters. Raw strength was their only criteria, as any weak link meant total failure. A single flaw could destroy the plan, although gene modifications were developed. Simultaneously on Earth and the Moon, the lunar faction achieved far better results. Now that they surpassed Earth in every parameter, Earth has lost its power. They constantly lose their right to vote if they fail this upcoming trial. If they lost the points competition, the resulting disgrace would ruin them. General Marshall's deep thoughts were suddenly broken by a girl wearing strange glasses. Sitting directly across from him, she quietly asked if he trusted these recommended candidates. Marshall answered, stating they could only hope these recruits did their best. After all, strict age limits ruled out many of Earth's absolute greatest veterans. Meanwhile, countless other representatives from various Earth districts watched in silence. Back at the meeting, doubts were spreading fast among the representatives. One girl wondered if the Marshal General was simply counting on pure luck. She clearly remembered that during the previous round, not a single fighter of theirs made